Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Slowly, I think that we can take a seat. And it's exactly 10 a.m. So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the authorities of our university, I have a big honor to welcome all of you to the University of Economics in Katowice at the third edition of international project Economics Without Borders. The project has received fundings from the Ministry of Education and Science under the program Social Responsibility of Science. At the very beginning, I have a huge privilege and honor to welcome our special guests, distinguished guests who will be presenters of today, tomorrow, and also on Friday. So the speakers for the first day, Professor Kim Pham, Victoria University of Wellington, New Zealand. Welcome. Professor Yuri, University of Auckland Business School, New Zealand. Professor Tymoteusz Doligański, Warsaw School of Economics in Poland. And Professor Justyna Matysiewicz from our university, she will be chair of this debate at the morning and the afternoon. I have also the honor to introduce the speakers for the second day, so for tomorrow. Professor Ildelberto Aparecido Rodello, wow, sorry, University of São Paulo, Brazil. Professor Ernest Blanco, National University of Sion, Paraguay. Dr. Joanna Gocłowska-Bolek from University of Warsaw from Poland. She will join us soon. And Professor Małgorzata Pańkowska from our university. And Professor Pańkowska will be also the chair of this panel. Also, I would like to mention about the guests, the special guests for the third day. They will join us tomorrow. It will be Professor Jorge Gomes from Lisbon School of Economics and Management from the University of Lisbon in Portugal. And also from Portugal, Miguel Feldman, head of department of the Portuguese National Human Rights Institution, which is the Ombudsman office for Portugal. But they will be tomorrow. And of course, I have a huge privilege to welcome all of you, all our professors, our students, our PhD candidates, our administration staff of our university, and also all other guests from different universities and from different countries from all over the world. As well, I would like to welcome all those guests who are watching our event, our project via internet. So all the guests from the online participation. Ladies and gentlemen, the aim of the project is to promote the science on the international scale by organizing at the University of Economics in Katowice presentations and debates of the scientific achievements, research, and work of outstanding scientists from all over the world. The project main activities includes 3 editions. Each one includes the scientific debates, which will take place today and tomorrow. Also the PhD candidates meeting, which the PhD candidates of our university, they have a unique opportunity to talk with the famous professors from New Zealand, from Portugal, from Brazil, from Paraguay, and of course with our professors from Poland. They will discuss about the topics that they want to discover during the PhD dissertation, as well as the different methods and the challenges that usually the young researchers can struggle. Also, each edition includes special speeches popularizing the science among the young people and the local community, combining together with the global village, which promote the culture of the continents that we took in consideration during the special editions. So the whole event all events are designed to present economic and social culture issue, including aspects of social responsibility and sustainable development from the perspective of the 6th continent. 2 continents for each edition. So the first edition of the Economics Without Border was dedicated to the Africa and Europe. The second edition was dedicated to North America and Asia. And finally, we have the third edition, which is dedicated to Australia with New Zealand and South America. We invited speakers are prominent scientists and experts from the countries such as, and for the first editions, there was Egypt, Spain, Germany, US, India, Azerbaijan. And these editions, we have the professors from New Zealand, Brazil, Paraguay, Portugal, and of course from Poland. They have been recognized for their exceptional achievements in the field of economic science, in particular in the work in implementing innovative scientific teaching and business solutions. Economics Without Borders, it will be one kind of the large-scale initiative that which help University of Economics in Katowice, I strongly believe, to be a Polish economic hub, at least for these 3 days. It will take place to be with the high-class researchers from around the world, will share their knowledge, discuss and exchange ideas and experience they already have. And I hope that thanks to our project, this project will help us to identify the new opportunities and hidden potentials, as well as to force the dialogue and then engage a wide range of the stakeholders, which increase efficiency of ongoing activities in the area of economic research and teaching. Ladies and gentlemen, I can say that the Economics Without Borders, the third edition, is officially open. However, I would like to add that our project received the honored patronage of the institutions, the Minister of Education and Science. We also received the honored patronage of the Silesian Voivodeship, also the Silesian Marshal, the President of the Katowice city, our metropolis, also the NAVA, which is the National Agency for International Exchange, and we also received the honored patronage of the CIMAN. This is international institutions that giving the international accreditation, confirming high quality of teaching at the university, and 2 years ago we also received the CIMAN accreditation as a whole university. A part of it, our university also received the honored patronage of the Conference of the Rectors of the Public Universities in Poland. Also the honored patronage of the CRUE, which is the Conference of the Rectors of the University of Economics, which is the 5 of such universities in Poland. Also Polish Association of Economics give us the honored patronage, Perspective, PROM, and our rector, Professor Celina Olszak. Nowadays, there is no event without media. So also we get the patronage of our local media, which is the local television of Katowice, Dziennik Zachodni, which is the local newspaper, Polish Radio Katowice, and for Academic Forum, and Nasze Miasto, which is the online journal. And as I mentioned before, generally we are dedicated to each editions to the 2 different continents. Today we will concentrate on Australia with New Zealand. So actually this because the Australia is dominate, so I would like to invite you to the short movie, which presenting some facts about this continent. Because we have the professors all from New Zealand, however, the majority of information will be dedicated to the Australia, and the rest, what is going on in New Zealand, will be told you by Professor Kim and Professor Yuri. Okay, so welcome to the movie.
Hi, my name is Hela, and I'm from University of Economics in Katowice, and I think that economics has no borders. There are 7 continents in the world. In this series, I'm going to fill you in on details about their economic and socio-cultural issues. Let me guide you across Australia today. Australia is the world's smallest continent, though it is also the sixth largest country in the world located in the southern hemisphere. As one of the wealthiest in the world, its income per capita fluctuates around 68,000 US dollars. The population is over 26 million and an average density of only 3 persons per square kilometer of total land area. The geography of the continent is extremely diverse, ranging from the snow-capped mountains of the Australian Alps to large desert, tropical and temperate forests. Due to rough terrain inland, the vast majority of the population lives on the shore. The nominal GDP in Australia is $1.55 trillion. As for 2023, residence suffers from 7.8% inflation and unemployment rate is around 3.5%. They pay $1.2 US for 1 liter of gas, while their monthly salary is $1,588 US. Rich in natural resources, Australia is the major exporter of agricultural products, particularly wheat and wool, minerals such as iron ore and gold, and energy in the forms of liquefied natural gas and coal. Every citizen has access to electricity. CO2 emissions amount to 15.3 metric tons per capita. Did you know that the Great Barrier Reef is the largest ecosystem in the world? It consists of nearly 2,500 individual reefs. Snorkeling and diving in the water is a popular form of entertainment. Australia is also one of the most popular surfing destinations. Tasmania has the cleanest air in the world. This makes it the ideal spot for walking, exploring the caves and kayaking. Australia has more than 60 separate wine regions. The majority of them are in New South Wales and Victoria. 80% of the animals that live in Australia cannot be spotted anywhere else. Among them, there are several interesting species, including kangaroos. That's all for now. If you want to know more about our world, check out our YouTube channel. And if you want to learn more about economics, study at University of Economics in Katowice, Poland.
But thanks God we have two professors from New Zealand, which is so beautiful country, which also belongs to this continent of Australia with New Zealand. And of course the most symbolic element is the special palm, which also is on the t-shirts of the All Blacks, which is the best rugby teams for playing. Many times they were the world champions. And Huaka, the special dance before the start the game, so probably everybody knows. But right now we are not talking about the culture, we have to talk about the economics, so I would like to warmly welcome and invite to the stage Professor Kim Pham from Victoria University of Wellington in New Zealand. Professor Kim Pham is the friend of our university. We know him for many years. Also a few years ago, before the pandemics, we organized a joint conference here at our university. And he is the founder of the Max Scholar, so the Marketing in Asia organization. So please welcome and take a seat. I would like to welcome Professor Yuri from University of Auckland Business School, New Zealand. He's for the first time in Poland, so we just start our journey. And I would like to welcome Professor Tymoteusz Dogiliański from Warsaw School of Economics in Poland. We also start our joint adventures. And Professor Justyna Matysiewicz from our university. She will lead the debates today. I have one more information for you. Our debate will finish before 11:30, so please don't leave the room before we will finish. Don't worry, you will be on time on the next lectures, because the next lecture starts 11:40. So we will finish for sure at 11:30. Also 10 minutes before we will finish, on the screen you will see the special code you can scan and you can put your data. So then if there is a student who needs the, I don't know, some confirmation that you are here and not doing shopping in the Salisha shopping center, so you can fill in and this will automatically gives you the confirmation of your participation, so you can give it to your professors in case that you will not have any problem. But right now, please enjoy the debate and get as much as is possible from the knowledge of the professors from New Zealand and from Poland. Thank you very much. So I give the floor to you.
Thank you very much. So welcome to our first session dedicated basically to innovation in research, in marketing, in management. Again, I will repeat, very happy to welcome you. I know it's the really, really long way to reach Katowice, especially from New Zealand. I think it's the furthest destination that you can choose, flying from Poland. So how was your trip? I will start with the sentences welcoming you a bit.
Well, the trip was very long. All in, I will be on the plane for 25 hours. It takes 36 hours to come to Katowice. From the moment I left Wellington all the way to here is about 36 hours, including sitting in the planes, including waiting at the airport, and so on. So if you miss the flight, then it will be another probably 24 hours.
Yeah. So thank you for your effort. Of course, Warsaw, it's not that far, right? It's just, yes, it depends what mean of transportation you choose. So let me start with some introduction and give you some details about our distinguished guests. I will start with Professor Kim Pham, Wellington, right? Many years working at Victoria University of Wellington, being passionate about the research, authored of very innovative concept, chopstick marketing. Also, he is very active in the field of creation and being creative, being founder of Asian Journal of Business Research, founding of and editor of Journal of Halal Service Research, which is very interesting, especially from our perspective. Also a founding director of marketing in Asia Group. He's an international marketing professor, right? We know each other for many, many years, right? I had a big privilege to take part in your conferences being organized all over Asia. I'm sorry. And so welcome to Katowice and to our university. The second guest, yes?
Thank you very much. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Thank you for the invitation. Yeah.
The second is Professor Yuri. It's a bit further even, right? Auckland, it's the North Island, as far as I understand, on the top of the island. Working at the University of Auckland Business School, but has very specific interest, right? And I think a lot of people share that interest. You are expert in psychological and social approaches to customer behavior, sorry for that. So it will be really interesting to see how the marketing, how the research from that perspective looks like, I mean, from New Zealand perspective. And we have Professor Tymoteusz Doligalski from Warsaw School of Economics, being really interested in e-business models, right? Digital platforms and customer value management. Being a blogger, I need to mention that, right? You can find the link to the blog on our website. Also being head of the e-business unit at Warsaw School of Economics. So welcome to Katowice, right? From some of you it's the first time, but I hope you will enjoy. If I may start, so please, Kim, can you start with... Yeah. Because I guess you have some presentation.
Yeah, I have some presentation. I was looking at the topic, and I find that why not I start with a presentation, and then try to interest you into what the research, the impact of my research in terms of business ethics and etiquette, And we work from there and see where economics without borders, is it applicable, given that today with globalization, you're looking at people from all sorts of, all parts of the world come together, what are important to them. Okay, so basically that is what I'm going to go through quickly. So these are the topics that is for presentation. And I did a study on 3,000 over responses which I received from across the world, 5 continents, and the responses. So far, I can say there are 92 countries participated in my study. And so let's see what's the result like. So I just quickly go through it. These are the demographics of the responses. What we are interested is to look at business ethics, code of conduct, okay? And business etiquette is the manners that is upheld by the people involved in doing business. So whether you are Polish, whether you are Slovakian or Hungarians or Chinese and so on, you will have a certain code of conduct. Okay, so let's see what happened now. So there's a buyer-seller relationship. Now, why was I interested in this buyer-seller relationship is that given today's world, sustainability, okay, so we have to make sure that the company produce something where the consumers are interested. For your generation, you are very interested in sustainability. So if the company say that we are going to reuse the oil, for example, are they really doing that? So in that sense, you're looking at business ethics and etiquette. So you can see that there's a total means and so on, how important are business ethics and etiquettes between buyer and seller. Okay, so this is just give you an idea. And if you look at in terms of business ethics and etiquette, you find that in 2019, the importance of business ethics in America compared to the rest of the world is very different. Okay, so the importance they place, for example. So you can see that credibility was more important in 2021, 2022 compared to 2019. So those are the things that I highlighted, and these are the importance in between buyer and seller for business etiquette. Okay, and you can see that there's the importance of meeting commitments and so on. So the important part is meeting commitments. It's no longer say, oh well, I produce everything and sell, there are people going to buy. Okay, so there's a buyer-seller relationship here. So, and it's important. When they like it, they will buy your products. Okay, and the importance of the business etiquette, ethical fairness is consistent across the world. Okay, very important. All right, so you can see that positive. I'll just go through quickly in terms of the explanation here. The main aim is for you to come back here on Friday, where I can give you more time to discuss it. Okay, so if you have any questions in terms of thing, you can see that, okay, let's concentrate in terms of New Zealand. Okay. So, is it here? Yeah. Okay, as you can see, New Zealand here, in terms of personal behavior, is low. But in terms of business etiquette, fairness is consistently high. And in terms of business integrity, is very important. So, based on this sort of research, we're looking at the importance of research. The impact will be if we know more about our customers and the customers know more about how the businesses work, and then you'll find that you improve in relationship performance. Okay, right? So you can see that if you have good relationship with your customers, it's very important. So you can see something here in terms of the circle. So Indonesia, for example, business people demand very high business ethics and etiquette. It's so high that the results, that the relationship will not prosper. Okay, so perhaps we shouldn't be aiming so high. We might perhaps reduce our hope, okay, our wish to improve on relationship performance. Okay, so, and similarly, like for example, in terms of business etiquette, Middle East, for example, are more interested in social status. So if you have visited Dubai, Oman, Bahrain, and so on, you find that people down there are they put very much emphasis on status. Okay? So if you go there and your status is a professor, you have more respect than your status as a lecturer. Okay? If you go there, if your status with a degree is less than, you have less status compared to someone with a PhD or a master's. Okay? So that is in terms of status, and it's very important in these countries. You can see in Australia and New Zealand, it's the other way around. Okay? It's more about business integrity. Okay? So business integrity is more important in Australia and New Zealand compared to Middle East countries like Saudi Arabia, Sudan, United Arab Emirates. Okay? So I would like to give you one more slide to see type of industry. So again, the industry varies, right? You can see that professional communication is more important in information industry compared to other sort of industry. And corruption index. Okay? So I'd like to stop here. I'll give more time that we share with the time that we have here. So to start off with the discussions about debate, the importance of research, the impact of the research here is very important, okay, for everyone. And let's open the floor and for discussion. If you want to know more about this, come back on Friday. I'll continue with my slides.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Kim.
Yeah.
If you look at the main trends of the research in marketing identified by Deloitte recently, you can see that business ethics is one of those topics that are highly researched. And what is interesting, if you compare the different cultures, right? You can see the different factors that plays the role, and for sure the intercultural element will play a significant role if you compare the countries like New Zealand and Australia towards the Asian countries, which are more like, let's say, status-oriented, right? Comparing to more...
This study, we found that out of 92 countries, we tried to group it into least corrupt country to the worst corrupt country. So Australia and New Zealand fell under the least corrupt country. And you can see that their requirements, business ethics and etiquettes, basically is assumed that in these countries. Whereas if you go to Nigeria, the most corrupt country in the world, for example, the business ethics and etiquette is very important before they even start to do a business relationship with you. So that's why I'm proposing that we move from just relationship building to an ethical partnership for the next generation.
It will be interesting to see how it, from more applicable point of view for the next session, right? So what really companies are doing towards using that knowledge in practical in New Zealand. Thank you very much,
You're
Kim.
welcome. Yeah.
So now can I ask Professor Doligalski to talk about business models, right?
Okay, can I have my presentation, please? Oh yeah, thank you. Okay, so a year ago I went to have a beer with my colleagues from SGH Warsaw School of Economics, and I asked them a question, and there was a silence after this question, and the question was following. What is, in your opinion, a breakthrough idea in the science of management? So, was there any idea in the management which changed the way we think, change the papers they are quoted, cited, and so on? And there was a silence after this question. And one of my colleagues said it is the business model canvas by Osterwalder and Pinier, which changed how we think about business models. And the other colleague said it is the platforms and platform thinking that changes the way how companies compete which companies are the most worthy, and so on. And now I'm going to give you some insights on platforms. So this is what I research, this is what I teach, and I'm sure that you're aware that platforms are present in everyday life of us. Like probably each of you have used some of the big tech companies within the last 40 minutes, but I would like to summarize it. So the first question is, what is a platform? And there are two ways to define a platform. The first one is technological. So a platform is a product on which the other products are built. So basically, for example, Microsoft Windows is a platform because there are other software working in this. Maybe Tesla is a platform if there are other producers which produce parts to Tesla, and so on. But there is also like economic definition of platforms, which is a bit different. So a platform is a company which allows other entities, other actors, other people to interact with each other. So basically it's an intermediary which gather people and allows interaction. And this is the economic or managerial definition of platforms. And platforms are different because you may think about Allegro or Booking.com as a platform. You may think about Airbnb. This is a great example. But also the meme websites, also the websites with recipes are platforms. Also the regular forums in which people discuss are platforms. They do differ. They have different mechanisms, and this is what I want to talk today. Platforms do matter. They change how they are present. They have been present, digital platforms have been present with us for the last 25 days. And they've made our life easier. They've allowed us to make transactions simple, faster, and probably the transactions are cheaper, like they cost us less. However, they force different companies to act within their ecosystems because they offer money, they offer clicks, they offer revenues. But in order to take advantage of a platform, the company needs to adapt to the platform, needs to invest in different assets, which the assets which will not be used anywhere else outside the platform. So basically, many companies right now are like prisoners of platforms because they take almost all their customers from a platform. And let me give an example. I went to a small hotel somewhere in the province of Poland, and it belonged to young people in their 20s. And I asked them, okay, this is all fine what you do here, but in which way do you acquire customers? And they said, we get all the customers from Booking.com. And I said, all the customers? Yes, I said, like something like 90%. Then I told them, okay, so you may be in trouble. When Booking.com changes their algorithms, they may stop liking you and you will not get any customers. So I advise you to try to acquire customers also in a different way. And in this way, this company, the small hotel, was a prison of a platform which is Booking.com. And what platforms do is they change the role of competition. They create their own mechanism of matching demand and supply. And this is what I want to talk, because these mechanisms are different. They differ depending on the platform. And this is in the real economics, not just marketing or management. This is called a mechanism design. And the person that you see on the slide is Leonid Hurwicz. He is the Nobel Prize winner of Polish origin. And he dealt with mechanism design as a theory. And right now, different platforms have this different mechanism, and this is what I want to describe. So what you see here is the OLX. OLX, like the website with classified, you can buy, in this example, bicycles. And you probably can't see it right now, but the bicycles, the offers are ranked by the date of when they were inputted to this platform. So basically, the newest are at the top, the oldest are at the bottom. But this is the case of maybe some discussion forums. This is the case of some classified ads website and so on. When we go to this is the website of Amazon.com. I wanted to show which offer of a book, Platform Revolution, Amazon will advise me. So this is on the left. You see this is the graphic, or this is the element from the regular website. So we can buy the book from almost $12. And this is what Amazon advises. And when we are in a hurry, when we don't elaborate all the information, we will probably do this. So we'll buy this book for $12 that will be used, and we'll think this is a bargain. But when we look into details, then we may find some providers which will deliver us this book for something like $6. But look, this price is not listed on the main. In the most important thing, in the most important place. This is because this is something like a buy box, and the buy box is an algorithm which displays, which chooses one offer, and is this displayed as something like the major offer or default offer and so on. And when we do not analyze all this, all other offers, we'll probably buy this default offer. So basically, this is more or less the same what happens in Facebook. Some news appear higher, have higher reaches, and the other do not. And this is the algorithm of Amazon.com, which chooses the offer to be displayed as the major one. And basically, what the algorithm take into consideration are the history, like reputation, quality of the reviews, the quality, and so on. So basically, this is for us to get from the best supplier, but this is the Amazon.com that chooses the supplier for us. And if you go to Uber application, then you don't have a choice. So basically, you have the choice where to go. You have the choice to between which kind of service do you want, but you don't have a choice. You are not picking the right driver. This is the Uber that makes it for us, or these are the drivers that accept or refuse our offer. But this is not us who are choosing the driver. And the last case, this is the eHarmony. So basically, this is a dating website, and dating websites have much to do with digital platforms, because they are digital platforms, and the digital platform sphere was developed with to much degree based on the dating websites. And basically, the regular dating websites works like something like Allegro or OLX. So a website in which you can see the profile of any person that is listed there. And it looks like a market. You may see all the profiles. You may choose the person that you like the most and contact the person. But this mechanism is not the most efficient, because less attractive person do not get any messages, nobody contacts them, and even nobody answers to their invitations and so on. So many of the users are somehow neglected in the system. So this was the situation. So this is something like market failure, and this was changed by the company called eHarmony, that didn't allow the users to serve the other profiles. So how does it work? So the person, while registration, during the registration, the person gives a lot of information about herself or himself, and then gets a few profiles daily, and these are only the person that the user may contact. So you can't browse the profiles. You may contact like the 5 or 7 or people that you were recommended by the company. So you chose is narrow. And they claim that they are efficient when and they give number of marriages and so on and so on. But for me, there is something else which is compelling. I mean the price that you pay for the service. So this is an Anglo-Saxon service. It's not available in Poland as far as I know, but it's available in New Zealand. And I have a question to our guests. Do you think what the prices are for this service in New Zealand? Do you know the prices for this service in New Zealand? Okay, so I check it. I assume that you will not know it. So it's something like $300 per year, and in US it's even higher. I mean, they don't display the prices, so I found it on another website, and they claim it's something like $600 yearly. So you pay something like $50 yearly monthly to use this website. So I know that Americans are more wealthy than us, but still this is the price. And it shows that choosing the right mechanism may allow you to make more money than just creating something which is a copy of an open air market in which everyone can see everything. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So it's another very interesting area to research, especially that I think it will be nice to discuss in the second part in our session about the consequences, like you said, about marriage index afterwards, for example. Thank you very much. And what about psychology and customer behavior? What is happening there? Yeah.
Okay. Hello, guys. How are you? Good? Right. So a couple of apologies. I just literally got into to the country yesterday. I'm still a bit jet lagged because it's 12 hours difference roughly with New Zealand. I'm not even sure what time it is here. What time is it? Around 11, so it's coming closer to 9. And nevertheless, really great to be here. This is a very new experience in many different ways. It's my first time in Poland, so thank you very much to the University of Katowice for inviting. It's also a very new experience because I just realized we actually been broadcasted live to YouTube, and it's the very first time that I've ever done anything like that. And I just actually sent the link to my wife. Hi, honey, I love you. And hopefully she's watching with 2 of my daughters. But the other thing, so if I am not making too much sense, I'm apologizing in advance, and I'll blame it on jet lag. But I don't actually have any slides, right? And the reason I don't have any slides is because, well, I'm going last, right? And there are good things about going last in presentation and bad things. The good things is normally people's attention dies down and they don't really understand what you're saying anyway. But the bad thing is also is that you kind of need to know what the people before you talked about to make the whole thing, the whole session make sense, right? And I didn't know what these guys are going to talk about, right? But it all works really well together because Kim talked about ethics and social institutions and how important they are in business and marketing. And Timothy talked about how businesses do their job, right? The platforms, right? And they're really important. So really, the only thing that's left really to talk about is the human touch, right? People. And this is what I do on a regular basis. I conduct research in consumer behavior, right? Which is pretty much as close to people as you can get because we are all consumers, right? And because I do research in consumer behavior, the very first rule is that, if I were to talk about consumers or marketing, we can talk about, about my research, about what I'm interested, and then we can talk about how to do marketing well, or how to do research well, right? So what kind of techniques to use, or how do you generate new ideas? And then we can also talk about how to do marketing good, right? So, if you're a marketer, and given that marketing is about selling things, how do you actually contribute to society, right? But this is what I can talk about. But really, this session is about you, because the very first rule in marketing is that you have to listen to your consumers, right? So what do you guys want to talk about, right? What do you want me to talk about? Anyone? Yeah?
I think that you can talk about more about consumers.
About what? Consumers, okay, cool. All right, consumers are people, right? And I think the great thing about, and if I understand, some of you guys are postgrad students doing a bit of research. Anyone doing research in consumer behavior? Or interested in consumers? At least interested, okay. So one thing with consumers is that people are complicated, right? And you find that there's no really kind of one way of describing people because our interests change on a daily basis and they're influenced by a lot of factors, right? So, for example, it's kind of like, sometimes you like watching movies and sometimes you like reading the books, right? And they're all parts of who you are. So when we generate research ideas in consumer behavior, you really can do it on pretty much anything you want, right? So in my area, so the way I do research is that I look around myself and I put myself in a consumer's shoes, which is not that hard because I am a consumer, and look at what are the kind of things I'm interested in, right? And one big thing, for example, for now is that we often, because consumerism or consumption is such a big part of our lives, we often create new meanings by engaging in consumer behavior. And what I mean by that is you pretty much can, if back in old days, consumption was about satisfying your basic needs. Like, we need food, we need clothes, we have functional benefits. These days, it's becoming more about meaning making, right? We can express a lot of meaningful ideas through consumption. And because of it, I think as marketers, we have responsibility to understand how our decisions, how branding and advertising actually influences consumer choices, right? For instance, and just to give a paradoxical example, right? So we all talk about sustainability. Can anyone name me one major threat to sustainability? If you look at the different causes of threats to why we're not living sustainable, what is it? Climate? Okay, so climate change, right? So we do a lot of production. Why do we do a lot of production? Anyone? Why do we produce a lot of stuff? Yeah? Exactly, right? We consume a lot of stuff. So in some ways, consumerism directly contributes to issues of sustainability. Yet, when we look at solutions to sustainable development, right, we still use consumerism. So, if you look at the way sort of organizations around the world tackle it, they're saying, look, you shouldn't buy just a product, you should buy a sustainable product. So it's kind of like you're trying to address the problem with the solution that comes from a problem itself, right? And I find that's very exciting because it's both paradoxical, but yet you can't really escape from a market system, right? Yep.
And what about customer experience?
Good point. So when we look at consumer experiences, right, obviously they're becoming more and more important. And one of the reasons for that is I think we sort of, with so much things going on in our lives, we have very little time to think these days, right? So, everything is fast, right? So right now you're sitting in this, it's this lecture, but I'm pretty sure some people will at the same time try to do some of their homework on their laptops, browsing internet, and because of it, and this is not just now, right? It's in any time point of people's life, we have less time. So because of that, what I think, the way we make decisions is becoming much more heuristic rather than planned, right? And a lot of times the external factors, right, the things that are not related to planned behavior influence our decisions more than actually planned ones, right? And that's very interesting for marketers because, how do you sell shoes, for instance? Or how do you sell clothes? What do you focus on? Do you focus on the quality of the products? Do you focus on, distribution systems? Or are you trying to teach consumers by making a meaning and staging meaningful experiences, right? And we have a lot of companies that focus on the later, like, companies like Patagonia or the luxury brands that they don't really talk about what the shoes are made of. They don't talk about what, availability or prices, right? They talk about the meaning, right? And again, and there's so many different paradoxes in it, so I don't know if you guys seen this, but one of the classical examples of paradoxical marketing is when Patagonia came up with this campaign saying, don't buy this jacket, right? So they're selling clothes by telling people not to buy clothes, and yet they're doing really well if you look at the sales, right? Yeah.
Just, it refers to the idea to not to consume that much in the end, right?
Yes.
My question is about emotions and the influence, like how emotions are used by marketers to influence the customer behavior. Probably is one of your topics because it's kind of hot topic right now.
So in research, right, there are a lot of different ways of looking at emotions. Back in old days, we used to differentiate emotions between positive and negative, right? And the simple idea is you make people feel good, and they're going to buy your product, right? Why? Because happy people tend to spend more, right? But markets have become much more sophisticated, and research became much more sophisticated. And I'm going to touch a little bit about it on Friday as well, but what we find out is that different discrete emotions have very different functions, right? Has anyone watched the Disney cartoon Inside Out? Yep. So in that cartoon, they identify 5 basic emotions, like joy, happiness, fear, sadness, so on and so forth. And what research shows that these different emotions, they have evolutionary functions. In other words, they develop as a way for our organisms to cope with certain situations, right? Now, why is this important to marketers? Well, the reason it's important because what we find is that by leveraging different emotions in specific situations, we can actually increase the effectiveness of marketing communications. For instance, if you're selling luxury brands, research shows that eliciting pride, feeling people proud, is much more effective than making people simply happy or making them feel grateful. And the reason why is because pride evolutionarily tied to status competition. And in doing so, it increases consumer motivations to look for status and thereby purchase luxury brands. On the other hand, if, for example, you're like me who's interested in corporate social responsibility, then you find that promoting campaigns that focus on donations, you're better off looking at self-transcendent emotions, things like awe or gratitude, rather than pride or joy, because these emotions, they develop as a way for communities to be built together, right? We feel grateful because our ancestors, they needed to work together in order to achieve big challenges. And therefore, leveraging this power of these kind of positive emotions can be much more effective than even sometimes leveraging, the more general effect, positive effect, right? Likewise, it comes down to, negative emotions can be used in very effective ways. Fear, for instance, right? Used a lot of times when we're trying to prevent certain behaviors, like drinking and driving campaigns. So, and some research shows that actually, there are 2 ways you can pursue people, right? One, you use negative emotions, and then you say, look, if you drink and drive, you're going to get in an accident. So there's a fear appeal, right? Or you can use the sense of sort of community building, saying how immoral it is to do these kind of behaviors, right? And depending on type of people and cultures, actually, some of these marketing tactics might be more effective than others, right? So for instance, we found that, we know that in the countries where people are more, have interdisciplinary self-control, so in other words, more collective, right? Focusing on emotions that related to community is more effective. On the other hand, if you, in countries like US, for instance, that's more individualistic, they're using fear appeal or the more self-focused emotions, because negative emotions tend to be more self-focused, yields much more effective results.
So it's a big trend to go back to evolutionary psychology in the research, and when we talk about experiential marketing, for example, uses a lot. So thinking what is happening regarding to research in your area, what would you recommend the students to read or?
I think when it comes to research, right, you really need to do what you like, right? And I think that's one of the great things about marketing, because everything can be lensed through consumerism. You can do research on anything you want, right? So when I did my master's degree, I really like computer games. So I did my master's thesis on computer games and esports, right? And then later on, esports became really great, really big. So sort of.
If I can interrupt, you are in perfect place.
All right.
We are quite famous because of that.
Yeah. And then later on, so my interests have changed when I'm doing my PhD. I really like sort of getting into fashion. So I did my PhD on luxury brands, right? And the point is, right, and this I think, like, if I were to try to persuade people to do research in marketing, is that you can actually do stuff on what you truly believe in or truly passionate about, and which is sorry, Timothy, it's probably not the same in other areas because you're more constrained by business models and how organizations think and so on and so forth.
But those models also, as we could hear, have strong influence on customer behavior, right? Even how the customers are selected. So, but what about the ethical issues?
So I think marketing is kind of is unique because, well, first of all, if you look at the broader business disciplines, I think marketing is relatively young, right? So economics, management even, they've been developed for a much longer time. Marketing really became hot after, it started becoming hot after post-industrial revolution, right? Because we've got so many different products and companies need to compete on. But we probably were not doing it really well in the beginning because the idea was you have to sell, right? And because of that, marketing developed this reputation for being a bit evil, right? Because, you say like, oh, marketers lie. You can't compete on price and you can't compete on quality, so you're going to compete on lie, which you call marketing, right? But I think because the consumerism had another effect on companies as well, because consumers are so powerful, people became smarter, right? And marketers quickly realized you can't actually cheat people for a long time. Because if you do that, you're going to get caught. And when you get caught, well, basically you get canceled, right? Like people say these days. And there are lots of examples of it. So Nike's sweatshirt, the sweatshirt factories example. When Pepsi did the, what's that lady's name? One of the Kardashians that tried to parody the Black Lives Matter movement, right? So a lot of examples where marketers got it wrong and they got punished, right? Because they were not sincere to their cause. Sorry? Yes, so there's a lot of ethical issues. And what's happening, what consumers do actually now is that they hold brands accountable for these different things, right? Like if you look at, for example, that Pepsi example of the Black Lives Matter movement, exactly the same strategy was used in the 1970s by Coke when they co-opted rebellion and tried to sort of, play it on the themes of Vietnam War and Americans being there and saying, look, drink Coke, join the rebellion, right? And that worked great. In 1970s, Coke was the Coke song was the most popular song of the year. Fast forward in 2000, Pepsi miserably failed. They're still recovering from that brand fiasco because people remember, people sort of doubt or people challenge the brands on whether they're really authentic to the causes that they promote. And nowadays, I think you guys are probably more familiar with this, people can take action, right? Because of social media, because of how we're all connected. The thing, cancel culture is real, right? And brands are scared of it. So in some ways, it's sort of becoming very polarized. If you get it right, you get a lot of benefits, right? The companies like Patagonia, some other ones, they got it right, they really capitalized on their brand image. But if you get it wrong, you get punished, and you get punished really, really bad, right? So I think coming back to moral issues, it's becoming a two-edged sword. You either get it really well, or you get it really bad.
Can we change the questions? Are the customers ethical? Do they need to make any misbehaviors or even pathological behaviors in the market? So, because it's not only the companies that they play unethical, but what about the customers?
Very good question. So one area of research that is on consumer responsibilization, right? And the idea here is like, it's more of a sociological kind of take on it, but there was this interesting discourse happening, right? So for social issues, we tend to blame governments, right? And back in old days, we blamed governments all. Something's wrong with the economy, something's wrong with the culture, you blame the government for it. But later on, we started blaming companies, right? Saying, look, we've got all this, especially with globalization, we've got these corporations like Starbucks and Nike, they go into developing countries, use unethical practices. So we blame a lot of them. But what's happening more recently, I think, is this idea of consumer responsibilization, where we kind of shift the blame not just on we still blame companies and businesses, but we also feel ourselves, we have a moral obligation to do things well, right? And what I mean by that is that if you look at how sort of discourse is changing about social issues like cultural appropriation, right? So cultural appropriation is when a brand uses the cultural symbol in a ways that not appropriate, right? So it's, for example, it's when, say, an American brand uses a appropriates an Asian culture and makes it look somehow less of, right, or commoditized, right? So obviously there's a lot of, for example, Dior with the, they had this issue with, I think they appropriated Chinese dress in one of their collections. Which backfired a lot in China, for instance, right? But there's also another layer to it, which is now is like, what about you as a consumer, right? So if you're a consumer and you're buying a Dior dress that was appropriated, say, from Chinese culture, do you participate in cultural appropriation? And what we find much more recently is that consumers feel somewhat obliged to do well, right? To do right choices. So with big movement in sustainability, it's becoming more difficult for consumers to go into fast fashion shops, for instance, right? Because you're not sure how you're going to be judged by others, right? And whether they see you. So social pressure kind of creates this idea of consumer responsibilization, which makes consumers, I think, better.
So
Yeah.
it's, yeah.
Don't you think that our social responsibility is another step in our needs hierarchy, because we have all the basic needs checked and ready, and now this is our step as consumers to have another need completed. So need for the bigger picture, bigger impact in our environment. So could you agree that we also, as the market, created that need in us, and also this is the fulfillment of this need? So we both impact each other. So not only the market is the bad guy who fuels consumerism, but also us, and we are too
Yeah.
much connected.
I think-
we cannot change one thing,
Yeah.
and it's problem solved. We also need to think if this is my need or it's because I saw a nice poster.
I think you're really onto something very important. Yeah, I totally think it's not even like, it's kind of like, it's co-opted relationship, right? So, and you're right. I think it comes down from the idea, one of the sources of it is that consumption, right? And things we purchase are not just about, the basic necessities or basic needs we have. We satisfy those, at least in developed countries. And so we're looking for something more. We're looking for meaning, right? And marketing, in some ways, by having this mass production, we eradicated a lot of meaning, right? So a lot of sacred things became profane and vice versa. But at the same time, we sort of, it's like every advertising, every ad you watch, right? It's not about the product, it's about some sort of bigger meaning, right? So consumers feel like, look, I'm not just going to eat at McDonald's, I'm gonna make myself happy, right? So even, having fast food became some sort of a symbolic expression. And in doing so, we responsibilize consumers, but consumers also, as you said, go back and responsibilize marketers in return. So, okay, we've done this, but I don't want to be happy anymore. I want to be moral now. So go do something about it, right? And probably the one sort of missing link there that we haven't talked too much about is culture. That the way the brands operate, the way that we sort of interact, brands and consumers interact is through culture. So, and marketers have a very important function there. Because on the one hand, it's kind of, we operate like a storehouse of cultural meanings, right? So we look at what's out there in society, we take the important symbols and embed them in our brands, right? And that's how Coke became associated with Christmas. Right? But the other way, the other function that's probably even more important is that marketing can be a powerhouse of cultural meanings, where we create new cultural categories that consumers take on board and live by, right? So for instance, has anyone heard of that when you propose to somebody, you need to spend 2 months of your salary on an engagement ring?
It's American idea, right?
Yeah. Do you know where it came from?
United States. And one company,
Yes.
famous because of diamonds.
Exactly, yeah, so it's De Beers, right? So that was probably one of the classical examples of how marketers created a myth from out of nothing, literally out of nothing, right? So there were lots of diamonds, most of them owned by the same company, De Beers, right? And they didn't know what to do with those diamonds, because diamonds were like kind of like industrial items, right? So okay, how about we associate diamond with love, right? Because what else makes people buy a lot of things without thinking about the price? So they created a campaign which was like probably one of the very early symbolic campaigns, which they hired, so they collaborated with Marilyn Monroe and tapped into popular culture, saying, look, if you really love somebody and you want to propose, and you're proposing once in your life, then it needs to last forever. So, and diamonds last forever, right? So why don't you spend 2 months of your, so originally it was 1 month of your salary. So I said, spend 1 month of your salary on an engagement ring, and it's going to make you happy. And people bought it, right? And just to see if it works, they changed the 1 month to 2 months. And guess what? It still worked, right? So what I'm saying is, right, yeah, so this is an example where that in some ways marketers have a lot of responsibility because the kind of stories we create really shape the kind of cultures or the kind of worlds we live in. And the things that's very powerful about cultures is that even rationally you can sort of disagree with it, it's very difficult to not behave according to the culture, right? So we all know that diamonds are overpriced, right? We all know that the minute you get out of the store with a diamond ring, it's worth half of its price, right? But yet we still do that. Why? Because it's part of culture. It's part of the routine we're used to. It's very difficult to change social institutions.
We could ask ladies sitting over here that during the proposal, if they receive something else than diamond, if they would be disappointed or not, right? And then we can measure somehow if it's working or not. Cultural branding, right, you mentioned. So it would be nice for those who are interested how the brands become of icons. Great Douglas Holt, right? He gave a lot of examples about how even the brand becomes a part of the society. Not only connected with the situation, but also being like kind of the iconic for the movement. So if you think about flower power movements, you have Volkswagen, for example, or the other movements that are happening from 70s till now, so you can associate with the brand. So cultural branding might be also. You mentioned the story, and so it eagers me to ask about the archetype. You mentioned Frozen, right? And how the brands are using the archetypes to create, to use what we were learned as children, to play on that. What do you think? Because it still is like using what we know, what is familiar, how we behave, what we were told by parents, be good, not to be bad, right? So you are promised to meet the prince and live very happy afterwards. Is it the truth? The brands are promising that.
I think my personal opinion, right? I mean, culture is make-believe, right? It's not a natural phenomenon. It's something that people create. And but they're very enduring phenomenon because it gives us a sense of continuity, it gives us a sense of history and sort of self-identity and things like that. And what's happening today, I think one of the big issues that we're probably facing socially and marketers can do something about is polarization. Is that increasingly people becoming, so for example, if you look at political issues, right? People are either left or right? And that's, well, so, I mean, it depends where you are in which part of the world, but I think there's becoming increasingly more of this tension of that, that people don't just sort of try to find a common ground, but try to shift in a particular direction, right? And that creates issues, it creates tensions. So in my research, for instance, I found that, so much of it has been conducted in the US, right? But political ideology really, in some countries, it really sort of, it really determines how you think, right? It determines the way that people choose the brands, for instance, right? So there are certain brands that are so tied to political ideology that, you sort of feel like your whole segment is around certain types of consumers who believe in certain things. But it also, it's also pervasive in other ways, right? It's not just about like you're Democrat or Republican or you're Labor or National. It implicitly influences us because it influences the kind of this implicit assumptions we have about the nature of the world, right? So if we look at it, right, so if you're more liberal, then you tend to think that, in terms of moral foundations, the people tend to prioritize equality over fairness, right? If you're conservative, it goes the other way around. You prioritize fairness over equality, right? And these kind of things, I think, because we're much more connected, they're becoming the issues of tension, right?
And this is a space for brands sometimes, right? So
Yeah,
they
so like things like-
started to be the iconic for those tensions. And if you support some kind of the ideology, you buy those brands to show, right? It can go from something that goes because of other elements like being vegan, right? Being sustainable, right? Or also because of political reasons.
But I guess the question or the issue I have with that is that should you capitalize on it, or should you find a ways to reconcile it, right? So is it right for brands to leverage the power of political ideology to create further polarization and further division? Or should we perhaps as marketers finding a ways to find some sort of middle ground, right? That you use, for example, branding as a way of promoting the opposite political ideology, so trying to get people to find a different perspective for that, right? And knowing what we know about the role of emotions, the role of cognition, about what determines our openness to experiences, we actually do have the tools to do that.
Okay, thank you.
I actually want to add something. What Yuri has mentioned here is in terms of polarization, and all the marketers have to go for the middle ground and try to influence the consumers to not to polarize, for example. The question here is, will the consumers take your side? I mean, will the consumers ethical towards what the marketers are doing? Okay. Take, for example, in New Zealand, should we be moving from relationship marketing towards more of ethical type of partnership? So if you want to be ethical, both sides has to accept it.
Okay. And the price, what about the price? You mentioned the price, and in the presentation of Professor Dolagalski was also the price mentioned, right? So maybe it's not about the need and my ambition, it's what can I afford in the end.
Yes. I think its price here is more to do with ethical fairness. So what do you think is fair to pay for half a dozen of eggs? Okay. So I experienced that in New Zealand, that the half a dozen of eggs has increased from $3 New Zealand dollars to about 8 New Zealand dollars. And in some supermarkets, they actually do not allow you to buy more than half a dozen of eggs. Okay? So is $8 here fair? Is marketer taking advantage of this? Surge in price that you search, the benefit of research of consumers that we know across the world, including Poland, Slovakia, and Eastern European countries. We know that different consumers in different society, for example, they demand certain type of ethical fairness or ethical integrity.
All right. My last question is about, when you think about your research field, would you name any kind of new trends or the methods which are used, or maybe what about the new technology or artificial intelligence, right? Do you see any examples of those elements in the research?
Okay. So I'm in marketing, right? And I think marketing traditionally was very dogmatic discipline, right? Depending on which part of the world you're in, but normally we have we have three kind of ways of doing research, right? You can do consumer behavior, right? You can do strategy, and you can do quantitative marketing or modeling. And each has a kind of like specific, I guess, a theme, right? Or ways of doing things. But if I look at trends at the moment, I think the quant people, like modeling, becomes really hot because, obviously we have much more data that we can model with big data and, social media analytics. So that's one sort of, if before it was a bit balanced, I think model is getting much more attention. But also I think there's more movement towards mixing different paradigms together. So very often in the top journals, you can get research that, they do some modeling and show, look, it shows external validity, right? That it works in the field, and then it followed up by a series of experiments to show a causation that it's not just random. There's actually a specific kind of causal relationship that underlies this effect. In terms of what you talk about technology, I think in my personal field that I do experiments, it was both blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because you get access to more data. So back in old days, if you do experiments, you have to do it with students, like in a classroom like this, and you randomly assign people in 2 groups. It takes a long time, right? Because you need pen and paper. So each experiment would take like a week to do, right? These days, you have online panels. You can do experiments like in 5 minutes, right? With much bigger samples, right? So these days, for example, a typical in marketing journals, you need to have 100 people per cell when you conduct experiments. But it was also, so from that perspective, you can do much faster research and much more efficiently. But the other side of it is also reliability issues. The fact that it's so easy to do we actually generate correct, truthful insights, right? Or is it just a fluke? Or is it just, do people do your experiments? Are they actually real people or are they bots, right? And this is very particular for our era of things, because there's a lot of misrepresentation, right? Or misinformation that we encounter, like things like ChatGPT, for instance, right? These things can lie, right? And you don't know if it's even a real person or not, right? So that's something probably would create a much more challenge in the future.
It's a good point, thank you. Business models and the research there. How would you conclude?
Okay, if you ask me about the trends in research, so I'm pretty bad at trends because I rather concentrate on what is constant, the same. But what I notice is the growing complexity. So almost everything is becoming more and more sophisticated, and this is now the question: how we research it, how we approach it. And one way is what you mentioned is sophisticated quantitative modeling. So there are models of sophisticated systems. However, these models are also sophisticated and they are easy to understand without a proper knowledge. The other approach to complexity is in research, this is what I did and what also to some degree my students do, is qualitative research based on in-depth interviewing. So recently I studied two areas. One of them was programmatic advertising and the other one was advertising in metaverses in virtual worlds. And basically this is difficult to research the whole system in a quantitative way. Surely programmatic advertising is the kind of advertising the way in which advertising website on advertising is displayed right now. So basically you go on a website, there is an advertising, you don't pay attention to how it is, and there is a lot of companies between the website, the publisher, and the advertiser. So it's not like one platform. There's a lot of platforms which overlap each other and they pay different functions, and there are some additional companies which provide data or which provide brand safety. And to sum it up, even the insiders in the industry say it's complicated, sophisticated, and they don't have the full image of it. So how did we research it? We just conducted 30 interviews with 30 people from different companies from this industry, and they gave us their opinions from their angles, from their perspectives, and in the way we managed to get an understanding how it works. And similarly, we conducted a similar research on advertising in metaverse. I know metaverse is a word which was hyped a year or 2 years ago. Then Zuckerberg fired or laid off the people that were hired before for this metaverse project. And now we are talking not about metaverse but ChatGPT. But still, the metaverses somewhere exist, maybe in a different way that we imagined. There is Roblox, which is a metaverse related to gaming, and there's a lot of people there. And yes?
Can I ask a question in context of the advertisement and the metaverse and whole social responsibility in business?
Okay, because in the metaverse advertisements, when the whole place was loud, I found a bit a problem because it was marketed as a space where we will consume goods without producing them, so we will save the planet and reduce consumption of the resources. But everybody has to have computer, not the bad computer, better computer. We have political tension about the resources needed to make processors, and we have them very limited on very exact places in Earth. So I found it contradicting, and I think that it wasn't spoken that much, that we all said, yeah, we will live in the metaverse, we will pay for the goods and we will not produce them, so planet will be safe, we will have less manufacturers. But whole computer systems, everything hardware is related to the pollution, and it's more dangerous than a clothing factory like, I don't know, Reserve or something like this, because we have to use resources which we have very limited. They usually gathered in the not so social responsibility ways, because we have many scandals about mines and other stuff. So I think that was missed. I didn't heard anyone said about this factor. What's your opinion about it? Maybe I misunderstood this.
Good question. None of my respondents mentioned this corporate social responsibility in the context of advertising in metaverses. And this is not that they don't care. Maybe it's a bit too early, because so far we don't know what what are the metaverse, like what is the final form of the metaverses. So far there are many metaverses. For example, this related to gaming, the one like Decentraland, which is kind of settlements where people go, build houses, they communicate or interact as avatars and so on. And there are also metaverses which are more like tools to communicate. For example, this hour meeting could take place in metaverse, and it wouldn't be like a virtual world, that would be just a meeting, like a Skype meeting or MS Teams meeting and so on. So there are many metaverses, so this is one thing, and we don't know which metaverses will prevail in the future, because the Decentraland, which was supposed to be the major one metaverse, it's not very often visited by its users. So I don't say it's failure so far, but it's not as big as it was expected. And Roblox, the gaming company, so probably you as young people, you know it, but there is a lot of children and young people who go there to play, but also to communicate, and maybe that play the role of a social media for us. So it's a tool for communicating. And now the other question is, who will be the user of virtual worlds? And one of the concepts is that the people that cannot use the functionalities or the values or benefits of the real world. So we go to the metaverse because you cannot consume the goods as others in the real world. So basically, they may be people who live in a small villages. They may be some people with some inabilities, or they may be people from the poorer regions of the world. So what was noticed that in this metaverses related to gaming, there is a lot of people from the poorer countries, or maybe kids from the poorer countries, who maybe cannot afford to go to the cinema, they cannot afford to go to the Disneyland or something, so they go there. So this is also like as something which should be considered, that maybe these cultural goods are somehow distributed to the other people that cannot consume it so easily.
Okay, thank you. Kim, what about your field? Anything worth mentioning because of the research, what is happening, or?
Well, in terms of international marketing, the focus is more and more into understanding the cultural aspect of your customers. Okay, so where are you from? Which country? And are they similar across the world? Which, from my research, we found out that certain demands, certain ethics and etiquettes are actually applicable throughout the whole world. I look at 3,000 over responses from 92 countries, and we found that basically ethics and business ethics, integrity and business ethics, fairness are actually straight across all the 92 countries that people expect that you should have. It's implied that you should have ethics and etiquettes, ethics, integrity, and fairness. But when you come to etiquettes here, the important part is more about professional communication. Okay? So if you speaks well, if you understand the consumer's background, cultural background in particular, they are more likely, to expect that there is a better relationship between the buyer and the seller. So that's what I can see the trend at the moment.
Thank you. Thank you very much. 1 minute for a question, okay? Or questions, if you can squeeze.
Very last question. And because I promised you that we will finish at 11:30, so I would like to keep the promises. So very short question.
So it's a simple question. What's the tendency now in the companies? It's they usually more adjust to the existing consumer behaviors with the marketing, or they more focus on the creating new behaviors suitable for them more?
Maybe I can answer, because it's less like consumer behavior, it's like the strategy of the company. Well, you can divide marketing activities into two concepts, as you mentioned. One of them is being market-driven, so satisfying the needs of the consumer, which consumer articulates. And the other one is creating markets, changing the consumers, changing the way they behave, changing their needs, and changing how they perceive products. And I explain it to students, and I say the difference between these two concepts is bigger than between B2C and B2B marketing, is bigger than offline and online marketing, and so on. And basically my idea is that it's novelty for the students of how companies change consumers. So surely they know it, but this is not well recognized by the students. And by students, I also understand people who work in marketing departments, because this is also like on a postgraduate level in Poland. And so I would say that more often companies want to fit into the existing needs. However, if they change the needs, and if they change the consumers, and if they manage to capture the demand, so if they manage to put some isolation mechanism or exit barriers or whatever you call it, they may be more successful, but it is more risky. So, but on the other hand, this is the question: where do you want to finally compete? Do you want to compete in something which will be like perfect competition? So, perfect competition is like being a seller on Allegro or eBay and so on, or whether you want to create like something like blue ocean, or to put it differently, a competitive, monopolistic competition, or maybe a monopoly within a certain market. So the other option is surely more attractive, but it's more risky and it's more sophisticated. Satisfying the articulated needs of consumers is probably easier, but you will make less money.
Thank you. Perfect timing. Thank you, guys, for this part.
Unfortunately, I will play the role of the bad policeman.
Okay.
So I need to kill the discussion, because actually, as I know, there is so many questions you would like to ask. So definitely, right now we will have 20 minutes break. On the both sides, you can take a coffee. We will start 11:50. The second debate. So you will have a chance to, maybe we can give the few minutes to have a coffee and to relax to our professors, and then again we will have a debate, and there will be also more chance to ask the questions. All right? So thank you very much for all the presentations. Thank you also to you. You are very welcome again. Okay, guys, so students, please come here, and there is a still space, so you can, also you can sit even on the stairs. Okay. Okay, guys, so please take a seat. And because we need to finish, we need to start very quickly. Yeah. So please, because I can see a lot of seats over there, so you can move a bit, and then you will make the space for the other students. All right, so it's 10 to 12, so still good morning, because we have new faces, so I would like to welcome all of you, all the new students, all new professors, and also these professors and students who already stay with us. Also, I would like to welcome very warmly all our visitors that joining us online. So on behalf of the authorities of our university, I have a big honor to welcome you and at the University of Economics in Katowice at the third edition of international project Erasmus Economics Without Borders. And this project was co-founding by the Minister of Education and Science within the project Social Responsibility of Science. So the main goal of Economics Without Borders is just to promote the research, to promote the science, and how the science will influence our life, everyday life of the society. So I would like to welcome very warmly our distinguished guests from New Zealand and from Poland. And we already this morning started the debate. So I would like to welcome Professor Kim Pham from Victoria University of Wellington in New Zealand. Professor Yuri, University of Auckland Business School, New Zealand. Professor Tymoteusz Doligański, Warsaw School of Economics in Poland, and Professor Justyna Matysiewicz, University of Economics in Katowice, also in Poland. We have also with us two speakers who will join us tomorrow. So Professor Herberto Blanco, National University of Asunción, Paraguay, and Professor Małgorzata Pańkowska, University of Economics in Katowice in Poland. So tomorrow the day will be dedicated to promote the science in Latin America. So I would like to also invite you to this program. Right now we will continue discussion about the specific of the research in Australia, New Zealand, in comparisons to Poland, but also in comparisons to the whole other world. And also from the technical point of view, I would like to remind you that around 10 minutes before we finish debate, on the screen, you will see the special code that you can scan and you can fill in, and you will get the confirmation of the participation in this debate. So you can show also to your teacher, to your professors, that there was confirmation that you are here with us and you actively participate in this event. So please don't leave the aula before 1:20, because 1:20 we will finish, so you will have enough time to go for another lectures. All right, thank you very much. And right now I would like to give the floor to our speakers.
Thank you very much. So welcome to our second session dedicated to impact of management and marketing research on society. We would like to continue our discussion. We already gave a lot of examples, but we do research. We are really keen on research and finding the information, but it's also important what we do with that information, how it's used, and can we have the impact. So it means on both companies and also the customers, because we represent a bit different fields and trying to point into the different directions, trying to show that research can be fun, right? So I would like to start with our guest from Warsaw School of Economics, Professor Doligalski. We have a small presentation.
We can see that. Oh, thank you. So let me start with some insight. If you ask me what is the most common strategy of a digital platform, it is following. First, the platform acquire sellers. So it's attractive and it's nice to sellers. Then it attracts buyers. And when it attracts buyers, when it binds buyers, when it keeps buyers with itself, then the platform becomes tough, becomes tough, difficult for the sellers. So this is what I want to tell you, to explain you in which way platforms take advantage of their position, of their privileged position. And what is interesting, it has much to do with ethics. It doesn't have to do much with COVID or war in Ukraine. So this current phenomena has not influenced it. This is, I would say, a natural stage of platform development. So in which way platforms abuse their privileged position? And this is an article from 2021 by Andre Hague and Julian Wright. And they claim that the platforms, e-commerce platforms, when they feel safe, when their position is secured, then they raise fees for the sellers. They change the recommendation algorithm, so the price matter. They made their system so the sellers need to advertise, need to pay additional money for the platforms. And now it's got I think, the most important thing. They start selling their own products, which is the imitation of the products sold by these sellers. And the last one is that they want to weaken the relationship between the buyer and the seller. So we as buyers, we should be loyal to the platform, but we should not be too much loyal to a certain seller, because if we will be loyal to a certain seller, then we don't need a platform. And it works. For example, I bought something on Allegro, I found something on Ceneo, but I don't remember which company sold me the product. I knew where I found it. So for our guests, these are two major Polish e-commerce platforms. And I will give you one example for the imitating the product. I mean, I'm going to talk about it, but the first example is that I've heard from a student from my lecture. I talked about it, and he said something like this. He's selling some stuff, industrial stuff, so the stuff some products that companies buy, and he thought about selling through Amazon.com. But he gave up this idea because he was afraid that the company, Amazon.com, will copy the product and will sell a similar products under its own brand. And we may argue whether it was the right decision or not, but what I want to show you are the examples which show that it works like this. So this is the article from the year 2015, and the article is when platforms attack. So what you see here are the batteries that you can buy from Amazon, and they are labeled with Amazon. And Amazon acts as Amazon has different business models. One of the business models is an online store, so you can buy books directly from the store or different products, and the other is the platform. So basically, you can buy from other sellers via Amazon.com. And these two things overlap. So basically, you can buy this Amazon batteries from Amazon and also from the sellers. But what is typical for the sellers, that they cannot reduce the price for the batteries. So the sellers can do less than Amazon can do. And it was a starting point. I think it was one of the first articles about the love-hate relationships between buyers and sellers. And you may say, this battery is just one example. But look, there is a brand which is called Amazon Basics. Amazon Basics is a line of the products which probably will not impress anyone when you buy these clothes, but they are practical, they are probably value for money category, and they are relatively cheap and good quality. And similar one, Amazon Essentials. So you see, these are the kinds of products which you buy when you don't want a fancy brand, when you don't want to spend too much money. And in this way, Amazon is competing with its partners, with its sellers. And this is not a fair competition, because Amazon or the platform, we shouldn't talk too much about Amazon because this is a general problem. The platform acts in two ways. As it's the provider of the ecosystem, it's provider of the market, it's the provider of the market mechanism, but it's also a major player. And you may say this is like an American problem. I think it's a general problem. Look, this is a Polish problem. This Pyszne.pl is like Polish Uber Eats. So basically, they deliver food from restaurants. You may say this is simple business model. Not much is happening here. But on the contrary, what they write in the contract, according to this article, is that they allow themselves to create a fake restaurant. What does it mean? They, for example, if they are like 9 sushi restaurants in Warsaw, they can create a 10th, and it will be a virtual one. So if user buys a sushi from this restaurant, another restaurant will fulfill this order, but will get less money for it, and the more money will go to the platform. And the platform has a privileged position because the platform knows which products are sold, which prices are the best, and the platform, last but not least, may advertise itself for free because this is its own ecosystem. So we see, again, this is not fair because the platform is provider of the marketplace and is also a player in this marketplace. Is playing according to the rules that it has created by itself. So these are the examples in which platforms operate and in which they abuse their privileged position. But you may say this is nothing new, because if you go to the traditional distribution channel, like to regular chain stores, then you will find something similar. They are similar products. So this is what you can see here is the screenshots from mobile application of Lidl, in which you have a choice. You may choose a brand product, or you may choose a product which belongs not to the platform but to the company. So the same happens in a completely different environment, which are the so-called pipelines, which are the traditional channels. So that would be it.
So we arise the ethical issue, and it pushes me towards Kim, because you can do more presentation, of course.
I hope I can improve on it, and yeah, but I'll just go. How can I get to the part where I stop? Anyone can help me?
I think you need to move the slides.
Yeah, I know. There could be a faster way, right? Yeah. Okay. Let's start from here. Now you see that I'm looking at business ethics and etiquettes. Okay, and I want to show that research is very important, and the impact of our research that can actually provide new information to buyers and sellers in terms of what each other needs to provide to the others, okay? So if you look at it from the point of view of academics versus business people, we divide gift giving. So now we're looking at gift giving. So you find that there is a kind of gift giving, the idea, and then in terms of gift giving is necessary, and gift giving is suitable, expensive gift giving. So you find that there's a big difference here. So you find that between academics and business people, when it comes to expensive gifts, business people tend to give more expensive gifts. And academics will say that, well, as long as you give gift, it's fine. Okay? So when you're in the real world, especially when other parts of the world, like in Asia, okay, Australia and New Zealand, probably you're least likely to give any gift because they'll be considered as corruption. Okay? But whereas in other parts of the world, like in Asia, like in Central Asia, like in Africa, for example, gift giving could be a necessary way to smooth the business transaction. Okay, so that's what the difference here. You also find that, well, in terms of people with age group, and you find that, well, this is the relationship performance, means the outcome of any relationship building. You find that actually in people who are reached 65 years old and above, when they have more than 20, 30, 40 years of experience, they have actually established a relationship. So therefore, gift giving is not that important anymore. But when you start a new relationship, that will be very different. See, if you look in terms of countries, I use certain countries for your information. I collected 3,000 over responses from 92 countries and divide them into various categories, and these are the countries that have a lot of responses. So if you look at that in terms of Hong Kong, India, Indonesia, and so on, the terms of giving gifts will vary. Okay? Business experience, you find that again, when you first started here, people with no experience, when it comes to more than 20 years, you don't need to give any more expensive gifts, okay? So, and similarly, if you look at corrupt countries, least corrupt countries, like earlier on we look at it, Australia and New Zealand categorized under the least corrupt countries, then you are least likely to give gifts versus, and the research and the relationship performance remains the same. But if you look at most corrupt countries, the gift giving is very important. So so when do you bring a gift? Okay, so the impact of the research here and now is that when do you bring a gift? So you'll find that, well, in terms of China, you give a gift when it's a building relationship, right? So just like a relationship between a boy and a girl, for example, when do you give your gift? Okay, so it is at the developmental stage when you're in China, but in terms of here, the inception stage in Thailand, for example, is very important when you first develop the relationship. Okay, so the gift givings here. Now, if we look at in terms of communication here, you have to be prompt, transparent, consistent. So this is very much consistent with our study. Their business ethics and etiquettes here are very important in a way, and it has to be clear and credible. Okay, and similarly, you need to show commitment. Okay, so success can be achieved. So you can achieve the success of the relationship here. So we're moving towards a business relationship to an ethical type of relationship. Okay? So you find that first you need to narrow the cultural gap. So you need to know. So again, you can see what I presented. You find that different culture in different society, they require different type of gifts or the amount, the price of the gift, for example. Okay, so you find, so I'm trying to put it come under the metaphor here, the chopsticks marketing. Okay, so I've been presenting this and trying to propose this to you guys that, well, chopsticks, as we all know, okay, it's just a pair of sticks, a pair of two sticks. But if you know how to use the chopstick very well, you can do a lot of wonderful things. Okay, so that is the metaphor that we're trying to use it. But success will happen, but it will not happen overnight. It will happen in the long run. Okay, so you find that basically when you talk about chopsticks here, it's not about just taking fork and knife and turn it around and become a chopstick. It has to be practiced. Okay? You have to practice just like building relationship. And now we're not only building relationship, we are building ethical business relationship. Okay? So where both the buyer and seller has to respect each other, and both the buyer and seller have to know what the other wants. Okay? So if we look at the business relationship here, if it is your firm level strategy, then you need to know the local cultural competency. And if you can narrow this gap, which means you need to know what the others want, and this is what, even the last piece of rice, you can pick it up. Okay, so wonderful things that you can do. So when you talk about cultural gap here, it talk about the business ethics and etiquettes here. This is one of a study that we look at. So firm level strategies, and this is what you achieve. And okay, so success will not happen overnight. It will happen in the long run. So I presented the other half in the morning, and I just continue with this half of the presentations. I just want to present to you, share with you that research, the impact of research can actually help businesses or consumers to know what they want and what the businesses can provide the consumers that required, right, requested for it, for example. So the idea here is that to get the gap narrower, that you should know what the other person wants. So basically, you need to understand your consumers. And given that the economics without borders here, we talk about here is that, well, it's not only limited to New Zealand, to Australia, you also have to look at relative to other countries like Poland, like Slovakia, or like Central Asia, and so on. So there are differences. So we maybe look alike, but we have different traditions, okay? So we need to know that. Right, so I'll just wait for your questions later.
Thank you, Kim. So basically what we are trying to say that the results of the research can help, in this case, the business people to adopt the behavior. And just because you are international marketing professor, so the first thing that comes to mind, it can be because of the different culture background, right? So our background will push us to certain behavior, but your research shows that it's also the length of the relationship important and the age of the person. So some adaptation needs to be done. In the same time, it's the main question, give or not give the gifts, because as you mentioned that in New Zealand, for example, can be perceived badly. Am I right?
Yes. When many years ago, when I started my career in teaching, and we invited bankers to come to present to us about doing businesses in China. That was in the year 1998, 1999. Most of you probably have not born yet. But there were a banker from Australian New Zealand Bank, ANZ. Okay? And he was adamant that he will not give gifts to the business partners in China. Whereas other banks like Westpac, like Westpac, Bank of New Zealand, and Australian National Bank, for example, they do give gifts. Okay? But Bank of New Zealand managing director refused to give gift. And he was actually called back because they're not building any business relationship at all. Okay? So because of his adamant that he doesn't want to give gift. So depends on where you want to go. But if you are from New Zealand and you go to Central Asia, for example, then you are in trouble. If you are not giving gift.
It can be perceived badly, right, as unpolite. But if we reverse that situation, I assume that it can be like too much overwhelming situation.
Yes. Yeah. He could be working in, say, go to America, for example. In America, there's a law that you're not allowed to give gifts about this bribery. So even though the bribery took place in Mexico, I read about the case that this Walmart got sued for some bribery in Mexico because they got involved with the politicians, and they gave some money and they acquired a piece of land and built a Walmart supermarket in Mexico, and they were prosecuted for that.
Yeah, but also the results increase the awareness of the whole situation and the necessity to adopt to certain situation, to be basically flexible, understanding different culture. Because because it's the question, what is ethical and what is unethical. And we had really nice conversation with Yuri, right, about two perspectives, like customer perspective, but also company's marketing perspective, talking about brands, what makes the brand strong, how to build the brand equity, basically. So what is your opinion, thinking about the ethical behaviors? We already touched the topic a bit, but maybe you have some more to add about, especially now, we are after a special time.
Right. Actually, maybe I'll take a step back, and because originally I thought the second session was about how to the impact of research, right? And I thought the audience I was imagining is faculty and PhD researchers, because so maybe what I can do is I can reflect a little bit on my experiences of challenges and issues that are arising from that, and perhaps we can have a discussion on what you guys think. And also, it might be useful to students to see how what you learn in universities might be different or challenging when you translate it into a business, right? So I think it is particular for business disciplines that business disciplines are applied disciplines, right? Which means, on the one hand, we need to create new knowledge, right? Because that's a part of scientific process, that our job is actually to create knowledge, right? On the other hand, because we're in a business discipline, we apply discipline, which means that there's a high expectation of societal impact, that whatever you create in your research, whether it's through interviews or modeling or experiments or whatever it is, it needs to be used somehow, right? However, and it's becoming more and more prevalent, that different, I would say in the beginning, right, business schools, and it's a bit of a history lessons, but in the beginning, business schools were more applied, right? They used to think that, how do we help businesses, right? But particularly in the US, the culture has changed a little bit towards focusing on research. And I think there are pros and cons to this, right? On the one hand, it's positive because a lot of times if you're not constrained by thinking of what is useful at the moment, you can create knowledge which might be very beneficial in the future. On the other hand, if you're always starting your research like, okay, what are the problems that businesses face at the moment? You're constrained in that space, and you only kind of solve the immediate problems, but you never see what future holds, if you wish, right? So, and if you kind of cross-reference with other disciplines, right? When the electricity was first invented, nobody knew what kind of future things electricity may hold, right? Because this kind of things take time, right? So I'm a big proponent of the fact that business schools should be doing research, focusing on creating research, right? On the other hand, we're also social institutions and need to find our own relevance, right? And it's important to build that, you know, it's like to show or demonstrate what do you actually change, right? So one of the major challenges that I think of these two different ecosystems, if you wish, is that we actually have very different motivations. As a marketing professor, right, when I look at the problems that I want to solve, I'm not so much interested in application when I start research. I'm more interested in novelty. Why? Because I want to create something new. There's no point of me to creating yet another marketing program which imitates another marketing program that already exists. What I'm interested in, what is a new program and how it's theoretically and scientifically different from what we already know, right? So if people tell you, for example, brands should focus on symbolic differentiation, if I find an effect that symbolic differentiation doesn't actually work, for me that's much more exciting, but it might be not very useful for brands at the moment, right? On the other hand, if you work with businesses, and we learn this, academics learn this a lot from consulting, is that very often you don't actually need to use your latest research in solving a business problem. Very often you can just as well solve a problem at hand by using older knowledge, right? Or somebody else's knowledge, not necessarily tied to your research. And I think this is where the conflict really comes from. And there's no really sort of silver bullet of solving that, right? But one way sort of that I find very useful is to think about the social impact as a kind of a linear process, right? And which starts with creating knowledge, with making people aware about what you do, then making people use what you do, and then looking at the societal impact, right? And some people are good at doing all four, but as we know, you know, people who are making food are generally not as good at serving it, right? So my opinion is that you know, as academics or as, you know, if you're a graduate doing research, you should focus on creating knowledge first, right? Because without creating knowledge, this whole institution doesn't really make sense, right? Because this is what we do. This is what we should be good at. When we create awareness of what we do, right, and trying to make people ever use it, that requires very different skill, right? It's kind of like, I think it's more similar to teaching than actually doing research because it requires negotiation and requires listening to other parties, right? And we all would love to do it, but we also have challenges because time is constrained, right? You know, if you're in a 10-year kind of system, when you know, and it takes you 6 years to produce a journal publications, you have very little time to actually get people to aware about it, right? So what I find it useful is that you try to find people who can help you with that, right? And this is where, like, I don't know, this is where the university's institution become really important because there's really needs to be support for this kind of things, right? So for instance, for me, I find that very useful to find, because I do research in marketing for better world, right? So looking at how marketing can benefit not only companies, but also consumer societies at large, I find very useful to talk to NGOs, right? And the challenge that I give myself is that, what can you do in 4 hours, right? So in other words, we spend all this time on doing research, and that's because we're passionate about it, but what can you do in 4 hours in terms of disseminating your impact, right? And these days, you can do a lot in 4 hours, right? You can send hundreds of emails to different organizations, say, hey, this article I wrote, what do you guys think about it, right? Or you can find, for example, organizations that actually specialize in that. So there are, like, you know, especially in NGOs, they're much more open to trying to understand what you do, right? It's trying to understand what you do theoretically. And if you do that, you don't actually need to pretend like you know anything about business. Because the chances are the managers know more about the businesses than you, right? But what we know is research, right? So I guess my point I'm trying to make is that perhaps we shouldn't be trying to do everything. Perhaps we should be trying to do what we're good at.
It's very important. And there is the ongoing discussion between two sides. I mean, those who do research and the results of the research when they publish sometimes are perceived as very theoretical, and sometimes it's hard to find the way how to make the use of the results from the business perspective. They expect some kind of the recommendation. They want to be much more practical, and it happens during the discussion at the uni, probably when the students are thinking and looking for more practical courses, right? Sometimes they are not very keen on the theory, but thank you for your words, right? Just to put a bit of order in the way of thinking and putting the university in good place, I say, to understand what is the role of the university. But now thinking about your fields also, so I would love to go back to my question about this application of the results of the research and what you can see and what is happening in your field from also ethical point of view. So is it like a change, because we live in the environment that changes permanently, right? COVID happened, and we all say that we behave differently. Companies are behaving also differently. So I would go back to my question about the ethical during that time and afterwards. Do you see some changes or improvements, or just the opposite, something bad is happening nowadays when we think about marketing activities? Any comment on that?
Well, I start off with a bit of what I've observed in the last few years is that if you look at in terms of New Zealand, the chicken eggs is one example, okay? So the companies are moving towards free-range chickens, and then they're no longer going to have caged chicken to produce eggs. So it's moving towards that direction. That's because the consumers want it that way. And similarly, fossil fuel, for example, in New Zealand, again, we have banned the production of petroleum in our offshore buildings, simply because the consumers demanded that we should move away from fossil fuel towards other kind of materials that can generate power. Okay? So again, on that, New Zealand banned that, but we actually import more oil from somewhere else. So we banned it, but we imported oil from Saudi Arabia, from Indonesia, from somewhere else, in order to power our plants, electrical plants, other than hydroelectric dam, for example. So we still need fuel. So the question here is, on the one hand, we cancel it off and say we're not going to have any more fossil fuel, our own production in our own backyard. But on the other hand, we started to import from other countries. So we actually raised the price of petroleum in our own country. So would that be beneficial to everyone?
Yeah, this is a good question.
Yeah.
And thinking about, from your perspective, from New Zealand perspective, about the marketing activities of the firms, right? And maybe you are following what is happening in another part of the world. What you can name as the trends that are happening in marketing right now, just to say, to show or to explain, is it like any kind of differences or similarities, or because of globalization there is no point to talk about those different perspectives anymore?
I think it's both. So on the one hand, I think, and what I mean by both, it's contextual, right? I think in some areas, there's probably not much difference between people in different parts of the world, right? Whereas in others, the cultural differences become quite attuned when it comes to consumer behavior, right? And I think the important aspects of doing research like this is to not say, look, New Zealand people are different from Polish people. It's more a matter of when and how, right? So, for instance, research has shown that when it comes to youth cultures, there's very little difference, actually, in the way that kind of people react to new trends like, you know, sustainability or fashion, because it's driven by globalization. On the other hand, if you come to more culturally sensitive like consumption decisions, right? Then there could be cultural differences. Right? And so one aspect of research that I do is try to think about in which context culture matters and which context it doesn't. And just to give an example, like, what would be a good example? Do you have it?
May I give you an
Okay, good.
Okay, can you hear me or not?
I think so.
I'm this kind of, does it work or not? Okay, thank you. I'm this kind of researcher that is seeking for stability or for the things that do not change. And business and economics are sophisticated. So you can look at business from the perspective of trends, but you can also look at the business from the perspective of the things that do not change. And the business models are the second one. So if you, for example, take the article from 20 years old about the internet business models, so you say that should be out of date, that the knowledge is not more applied, and I would say that 80% of this business model are still in use. Something have changed, but basically, but the general idea how the online companies operate, being, for example, an online store or a content provider or a platform, a community, this is more or less the same as it used to be in 20 years ago. Surely the companies are different, they have different strategies, they do different things and so on. And if you ask me, what is like the phenomena in marketing, which is out of local, like which happens the same in different cultures, in different market culture, I would say that this is something like channel conflict. So conflict which is based on competition between different channels in the same company. And when I teach e-marketing at my university, I give students following example. In the late 90s, Levi's, like the producer of clothes in the US, they allowed to sell to buy clothes online. So they started online selling. It was the late 90s. And this decision was successful. So what went wrong? When was the problem? The problem was following. The retailers which cooperated with Levi's, they protested and they said, if you do not stop the online selling, we will stop selling your clothes and we'll sell clothes of different companies. And surely Levi's gave it up. And it was the late 90s in the States, so 97 something, maybe 96. And I told this story to Polish students, and one of them said it was the same with my company. So basically, they gave up. They wanted to expand to online selling, and like shortly before pandemics, another student told me it's the same in my company, but it's even worse. So the company is selling the stuff that you use in the garden. To sew the grass or something like this. So you may imagine what kind of equipment is this. So, and they basically sell through two channels. One of the channels are sales representative, the other sales representative, and the other one is the website. And what was the problem in this company? Namely, the sales representatives, they told their customers, do not visit the website because you will get the viruses and they will destroy your computer. And what was the reason for such claim? The reason was that on the websites, the prices were lower. And if the customer visited the website, then it probably would buy online and not from the salesperson. And this is an example of marketing phenomena which happens similarly in different cultures, in different times. So as I told you, the example is pretty new, but the example of Levi's is like 25 years old, and it's from the early e-commerce. So what is interesting in marketing, in business, and in business and economics in general, that certain things are, as Yuri said, are culture dependent, and the others are free from culture, although culture may somehow influence it from, let's say, from outside.
Yeah. So that kind of reminds me of one study that I've done with my student. And it was at a time when sort of social media advertising was just emerging, right? And so in general, right, at the time we were interested if social media post is endorsed by friends, we would have a positive effect on intention to purchase a product, right? And the general prediction is, yes, it should, right? Like, your best friend endorsed this post, and the post happened to reference a certain product, you'd probably be more likely to buy that product, right? And we've conducted a study in US and Korea, and it was the same effect, right? And you can't publish a paper when it's like this because it's boring, right? But what we found more interesting is that if people's persuasion knowledge was activated, so in other words, if they were skeptical about the post, so for instance, if the post appeared with the disclosure that the post is advertisement, right? Note, this research was done before the disclosures were enforced on social media, so it's when it was still optional. So what we found that when there was no disclosure, the effect was the same whether it was in US or in Korea, right? So friends' recommendation had a positive effect on advertising effectiveness. But when there was a disclosure, it was basically it's divergent effects. So in US, when the disclosed post was advertised by friends, it had a negative effect versus not having friends, because people thought that it's the friends' recommendations were corrupted, and therefore that kind of post actually had less credibility when it was actually without friends' recommendations. So therefore, the system somehow is being annoying and utilizes your private information about your friends, making it endorsed on social media, right? On the other hand, in Korea, in a disclosed advertising condition, when the advertising was disclosed, friends' recommendation had a positive effect on the advertising effectiveness, right? So positive effect in Korea and negative effect in the US. And when we started looking at it deeper, basically it was to do with how different cultures frame relationships and friendships, because in Asian cultures, relations tend to be malleable. So in other words, people have less sort of clear boundaries between private life and commercial life, which makes them more accepting when you have friends' recommendation in commercial settings. Whereas in other countries, in this case it was US, there's much more clear boundaries, right? So friends are friends, business is business, right? Don't mix pleasure with business. And therefore, utilizing personal information for promoting a commercial product had a very negative effect. So that's what I'm trying to say. So, in general, yes, friend recommendations are good in business, right? They have a positive effect. But there are certain conditions, like in this case was disclosure of advertising, where culture becomes really, really important in driving the consumer behavior.
It's very interesting. It's also about the trust in general, right? Do we trust to what we were told in the message also, right?
But I guess what I'm trying to say is that people can make inferences about trust in different ways depending on their culture. But it only happens in certain conditions. It doesn't always, it's not a universal kind of thing that, if you're from X country, you're thinking in X way, and if you're from Y country, you're thinking in Y way. It's more like that, depending on the context, there could be cultural difference in thinking, and in others, there's no difference at all.
Yeah, I support what Yuri has mentioned here, is that I think in Asia, celebrity endorsement is actually more important than, say, in other parts of the world. I mean, like in America, or maybe in Poland, I don't know. But in Asia, if you are famous, and you tend to endorse a certain products, the consumers in particular will just buy it without even knowing what they're buying. Okay? So again, where is that marketing taking place, and in which culture, and in which society, and so on?
So recommendation. And what about the brand itself and the appeal and everything? What it's not only I'm buying not only because of the friends, also because of other reasons, right? To fulfill my personal needs. So when you think what is happening, thinking about the brand and how the brand communicate, what would you say what is happening right now? It's more going back to emotions and what we started to talk.
So in my research, I think, so how many people study marketing? Can you just raise your hand?
Are you still with us, guys?
Some. So you probably heard of this thing called segmentation, targeting, positioning, right? Like it's this thing created in the 60s and everybody seems to think it's like a thing, which in some ways it is. But what I mean is that the way it's normally taught from a textbook is that it's very kind of planned process, right? You have a big market and you put people into the boxes, right? There's A segment, B segment, C segment, and then you choose one of those segments because they're homogeneous within and heterogeneous across, and then you create a positioning that fits that segment, right? So for some products it might work, but for a lot of cultural categories, for a lot of symbolic categories, it doesn't necessarily work that way because symbolism is malleable, right? So think about luxury brands, right? So people buy luxury brands for a lot of different reasons, right? Some buy it to convey status, some buy it to indulge themselves, some buy it because it's high quality. Now the problem with this kind of thing is that people who buy it for status can also buy it for indulgence, can also buy it from investment, right? So when you try to do segmentation, targeting, positioning, it becomes really, really annoying because you don't actually know what's the most important value driven in this segment, right? So how do you do advertising? So should you base it on status? Should you base it on, on indulgence or quality? And the traditional approach would be like, try to find correlates of the segment and then try to position that. So for example, if you have some sort of correlation between age and status, that older people like status more, you say, okay, so maybe you can try to target all the demographic with a status appeal, right? So it might work, but it doesn't work really well, right? So another approach is that, which is a little bit more advanced, is you try, because luxury is a malleable concept, you can activate certain inferences in consumers at the time of marketing communications. So in my research, what I found is that if you activate a particular type of mindset, right, cue people think in a particular way, and in this case, it was making people to adopt more growth mindset versus the fixed mindset by having certain information about the brand in the message. So for instance, you can activate fixed mindset in consumers by talking about history of the brand, right? Or you can activate a growth mindset by talking about innovations of the brand, right? So if you talk about innovations, we found that using cognitive message, so using message that talks about the quality and superiority of luxury brands in terms of functional performance, produced much more effective advertising. But if you cue history, right, and fixed mindset thinking, then the status appeal was more effective, right? So in this case, rather than doing segmentation, targeting, position based on different types of people, you make people to think about luxury in a particular way, and then you create advertising that works the best possible way in that particular situation.
Interesting.
Okay, if I may follow on Yuri's narrative. I also use this as STP, so segmenting, targeting, positioning approach in teaching online marketing. So this is, as far as I know, taken from mass marketing, when companies did communicate with the market, with the consumers, with mass media, using mass media. And so the last stage there is positioning. So this is a situation in which the brand or the product or the company is perceived with certain attributes by the consumers. At least I understand this like this. And then I ask students, these are the students of some kind of online marketing course, kind of this, give me an example of a brand or a company which is well positioned, which has these attributes pretty well known among consumers. And do you know which brand they give? They give something like brand like Volvo, which is safety, maybe IKEA, which is some kind of related to the family, and so on. And if I ask them for examples, they almost never give an online company. So my claim, I mean, this is my speculation, I didn't research it like in a formal way, that the online brands, not only platforms, they have this symbolic differentiation. It's weaker than the traditional brands. So basically what online brands communicate, or in which way online companies compete, is more like functional brands than, functional values than the symbolic values. So in this way, the online companies would be more functional. They would make our life easier when they would give us some identity, they would enhance our personality, or they would give us some image that we would be able to communicate to the others. I'm not sure whether you guys agree with that, but I mean, this is my speculation. So that the online brands are somehow limited compared to the traditional brands, but maybe they also are developed not so much with advertisement, but with everyday use. So basically, my claim is following. This is also what I ask my students. Do you remember an online do you remember an advertising campaign for an online brand? And sometimes they happen to give an example. But most of the brands that we use, be it Google, Facebook, Onet Wirtualna Polska, and those Polish examples, they were built without a significant advertising campaign. So they were built on like everyday use, bringing giving us everyday values, maybe also word of mouth, but not with the institutional communication. So maybe that's why these online brands, they differ a bit from the traditional ones.
So I think if I understand you correctly, it might be tied to this idea that, back in old days, when we did advertising, and some people still think that it's a thing, that you should create a brand with the perfect story, right? That, it's coherent and with all the different aspects of marketing communications are very coherent. You create this very nice story where everything is perfect, right? You get the right celebrity, you get the right message, you get the right country of origin, and it creates what we call congruence effect, right? But the problem with this kind of congruent, very coherent and stories is that they get boring really fast, because it's like watching a movie where everything is predictable, everything is perfect, right? And I think particularly with an online space, there's probably perhaps more move towards humanizing brands a little bit. And people are not perfect, right? That when you think about it, it's much more interesting to see something growing and developing and changing as opposed to something always being the same, right? And one way of doing it is create what I call imperfect story. A story where it has a lot of symbolic cues, but they're not necessarily as well connected as in a perfect story, because you then allow different people to derive different stories from the same narrative, right? So one example of it, even before the internet, was Star Wars, actually. Right? So Star Wars has a very long story, right? And some things there make sense, some things don't make sense, right? But the reason why it became so powerful in terms of the iconism as a movie is because it has probably every single symbolic archetype from any part of the world, right? It has references to religion, to philosophy, to spirituality, but it's done in a way that doesn't tell you, hey, this is, you can see Excalibur in the lightsaber, or you can see entrance to the Death Star is Odyssean, myth, right? It's metaphoric, which allows then people to draw on their own experiences and create connections with the movie, right? So in the same ways, what brands are doing now is that they're creating this narratives with holes in it that allows people to fill in their own holes, and it's kind of like you create this personal relationship, parasocial relationship with the brand, where you feel like, you're kind of closer to it, right? And that allows you to tap into different markets without actually doing too much segmentation, because it's just brand means different things to different people.
So basically, brand talks to us. So saying the story, we
don't need to connect to brands in the same way. Like I can think of Apple something and you can something different, but from Apple's perspective, it's fine as long as you like it, right?
You buy it in the end, right? So the right brand narrative and putting it to the context of storytelling, for example, using the right archetype and create the appeal that works is the key of success.
Talking about these story things, I came across an advertisement. It's Coca-Cola advertisement, and maybe you guys have seen it. It says 3 frames. Okay, the first frame is that the guy was lying on the sand, okay, flat. And the second frame was that he's drinking Coke. And the third frame, he's starting to run again. So this Coca-Cola executive was talking to his friend in a pub, and the friend said, "Oh, you have been an executive, Coca-Cola executive in Saudi Arabia for years." And then this guy said, "Oh yeah, I produced 3 frames. A, the guy is lying on the sand. B, the guy drinking Coke. C, the guy running again." Okay, so it's a good story, right? But the guy continued and said that, "Nobody told me in Saudi Arabia you read from right to left, whereas we read from left to right. So in Saudi Arabia, you read from left to right, from right to left, which means the guy is running, drink Coca-Cola, and he was lying on lying flat on the sand." He said that story failed in Saudi Arabia, and he got sacked, okay, for not knowing the cultural aspect of it. So again, going back to storytelling, it's just not just story, but you need to understand the background.
The story,
yeah.
the context.
Yeah, and the
What we
context.
said. But I can see we have questions.
Hello.
Or comments. Very well.
So I'm a lawyer, so I'm going to defend the 4 countries. I'm from Paraguay. And it seems like all the professors were discussing about ethics and were discussing about moral ground. And in my opinion, I think there are 2 types of corruption. One of them is like the PT, the simple ones, bribing the cops. That happens a lot on the South America, maybe the poorest countries. But then there's another type of corruption, the sophisticated, the intricate, the very, very smart corruptions. So, and my question is, in my country, Paraguay, there are both of them, right? So, which one is worse? And in my opinion, the worst one is the sophisticated one. We have so many examples of that. The banks, the case of Volkswagen, and some other cases. So, and it also applies to the platform, right? Who are the platform that wins all the customer? The ones with the money, the sophistication like Amazon. So, my question to all of you is, what do you think about these 2 types of corruption that exist around the world? Obviously, in the poor countries, we had the petty ones. But in the rich countries, they had the sophisticated ones.
Very good question, right? So marketing is called again. So thinking about the platforms, you mentioned a lot of examples when some customers are excluded, right? Or they are given the content that it works for the company, or even they create fake companies.
Yes, this is the problem of platforms. When the platform is mature, then it can take advantage of its privileged position and can grasp the value which should go to its customers, which is in this case sellers, but sometimes they are content producers and so on. And it happens. This is why platforms do this, simply because they can. Because they have too much power. I don't have clear answer whether we should call it corruption or whether we should call it monopolistic behavior. Maybe the other is even worse, because then you can be sued for that. Because there are some, the question of regulation of platforms, this is the topic which is highly discussed right now. For the last 3 years, I think this is the major topic in conference on platforms and in the best universities like Harvard and so on. Surely there is, and the concept of platforms is developed also in the area of law. But I don't have clear answer right now. So I can give you corruption is something is the way when happens when the economic market mechanism does not work and someone wants to make his or preferred their own preferred solution work. So in this way, the person or the entity pays for that. So we can treat somehow corruption as a market mechanism, but still it's very controversial what I'm saying right now. So basically, the point is that I'm not pretty sure how to put the corruption to the platform, but maybe what platforms do is even worse than the corruption, at least on the low level.
Maybe it's about if we can recognize it, and maybe it's if there is a penalty, we can prove that we are cheated, right? So this is also.
May I put another topic on the table? It's because you are talking about the companies, the corruptions and the branding and so on. But I would like to come back to the customers. And since decades, there is a very big phenomenon concerning the sharing economy. And from the customer perspective, is the collaborative consumption. Well, thanks to the new technology, after the financial crisis 2007, 2009, there was again blooming of the sharing economy and the collaborative consumption. During the pandemic and after pandemic, and also because of the war at the Ukraine, again the collaborative consumption is growing. But what do you think? What will be the future of this area when we are trying to be a bit out of the main market or the mainstream market, from the perspective of the customers and also from the perspective of the platforms? Because thanks to the platforms, the sharing economy could be put on the much higher level. Thank you.
The sharing economy is an interesting concept which allows us to take advantage of a good without paying for it. And it has developed with the internet. What is interesting, I like that also the smartphones help some sharing economies platform to start operating and so on. So for example, I'm talking right now about the website called Shafa or Vinted. These are the website which allows to trade used clothes. I'm asking students why these websites didn't start in the year 2000 with the first internet revolution or late 90s, and there's no clear answer. I mean, the best answer is we didn't have at the time mobile phones, or we didn't have the cameras which allowed to take pictures and to take digital pictures. So basically there is this trend of sharing economy, but the problem with sharing economy is how we define it. Whether it's is this the situation in which a consumer is using a product belonging to another consumer, or is it a situation in which a consumer is using a product without buying it but is renting it? But if we define in the second way, then even car rental companies or even hotels are in the sharing economy, which is nonsense, at least for me. So basically, maybe we should reduce the sharing economy to this C2C transactions. And in this way, there is a huge market for used products, which users sell to each other. And in this way, that will probably grow, but still we are missing somehow. So I have no clear answer to what will happen in the future, whether we will rent more products without buying it, or is it the level that we are right now? So in this way, we are coming more to a consumer behavior. And
so prior to coming here, actually, I attended a session in Melbourne University where sharing economy was a big thing, right? From a consumer perspective. And one thing we discussed was that, I mean, the term probably is, like as Timothy suggested, probably not right? That when we talk about sharing economies, we're talking about platforms like Uber and Airbnb. It's basically where it's like sort of consumer entrepreneurship, right? Where the consumers are also producers and producers are also consumers, right? And sort of, there are a lot of different issues to think about, but one of them could be how much power the platforms themselves have, right? And what is the impact on this entrepreneurship, right? So for instance, I don't know if you guys seen, but the Uber shares dropped significantly. And one of the reasons behind it is because they top users, sorry, not Uber, Airbnb. So their shares dropped radically in one day because there was a news article, I think it was in Wall Street Journal, that talks about how the top users of Airbnb, basically, rather than going through the system, right, they started poach their customers directly. So, you know, like somebody stayed in Airbnb, and rather than encouraging them to stay there again via the Airbnb website, they said, oh, next time just email me, right? And then, you know, I'm going to give you a discount, right? So it's kind of like a way that consumers bypassing the system, right? And then, but you'd think, what did you expect, right? What do you expect is going to happen? So when the certain consumers in the network getting much more power than the others, they can actually start getting outside the network, right? So that's one interesting issue that I think we'll see how that will develop and what that means. The other one is, so Airbnb and Uber and all these kind of things, they have different effects in the different economies, right, I think. So for instance, in some countries, they banned Uber, right? And the reason why is because the taxi drivers actually were already under pressure in those countries, right? And when the things like Uber or Airbnb come, it actually makes those people lose their jobs, right? So then, even though we like to think about sharing economy as a very positive thing, you know, it can, in certain contexts, right, it can have a very negative effect on social well-being, right? At the same time, so I have a colleague who's doing research in Ghana, right? And they're looking at how Uber, coming to Ghana, started institutionalizing certain aspects of taxi driving that weren't there before. So apparently, prior to Uber coming to Ghana, you pay for taxi is like pay you what you want. So basically, the taxi driver is going to look at you, and if you dress very nicely, they're going to charge you a very big price. And if you kind of look poor, they're going to charge you less price, right? So there was no really kind of, you know, like a standard way of charging for taxi, right? And there's obviously also security issues, right? So one thing that Ubers did, actually, is like going into that country, is that it started institutionalizing prices and you know, like addressing some safety issues, concerns, right? So I think it'd be interesting to see what positive and negative effects of sharing economy actually are in the future, right?
And thank you so much. And actually, my question was by purpose because we are looking for the answer for the questions concerning what is the role of the researchers and the universities for the society. And because my concern is the customer rights protections on the market. And we have quite well regulated the customer rights and how they should be protected on the regular market, so B2C. Yeah, so because the customer is the weaker point of the market, so that's why the government should support the customers on the market in front of the bad companies. But the problem is with the sharing economy, when we have the customer to customers, and what kind of rights the customer, how to protect the customer rights, because we have two equal market players, right? So there is no this difference between the professionals, which is always company, and the customer. So that's why I think that there will be one of the biggest issue, because even on the European level, right now they are the commissioner dedicated to customer protections. They are really, there is a very big headache for him what to do and how to guarantee the customer rights on that market, and maybe the platforms will help us, right?
Yeah, so, sorry, but then I think when it comes to regulations like this, you have to have a platform accountable for it, right? So normally the ethical issues to do with what you allow people to do on a platform, and the platform is responsible for that, right? So
it's what does Airbnb, I think, introducing the insurance. It's like Airbnb waiver. I don't remember the name, trying to protect both sides, right? So in case of any claim, they compensate. And it was also the big discussion about the safety if the Uber is concerned, right? Because there were some situations and Uber had to react. Yes?
I will not completely agree with the statement that the consumer is a weaker party in the relationship with the company. So it depends. And the platforms are the reason. Suppose two cases. You order the food from the restaurant. So the first case is you call to the restaurant, they deliver it to you. The second case is you buy it from such a platform as Uber Eats or Pyszne.pl, and they deliver the same food to you to your home. In which way, in which situation, your position is stronger as a consumer? I would say in the second one, because it's much easier to criticize, to negatively review the company on the platform. Surely you can do this without the intermediary, but when you consider the relationship between a consumer and a company, which is mediated by the platform, then the position of a consumer is much stronger, because the person may write a negative review which will affect the choices of the future potential customers. And this is very powerful if you are a new company, and if you will have a few negative reviews in the beginning, that will make your life much more difficult. And that's why what some platforms do, they don't display the reviews until reaching a certain number of reviews. So they are not accidental. So they present like the full image and so on and so on. So in this way, the platform the design of this mechanism makes the position of a consumer stronger. But surely this is in relation to the seller, not necessarily to the platform itself.
Yeah, so right now we are touching the very important issue, which is a customer education, because we have to educate the market education of the customers, yeah, and this will be our role, and also the role of the companies, right?
To make them more aware. So maybe we have like a few minutes. You're very quiet, but probably would like to ask some questions.
Yeah, there's one question. Yeah, I will give you mine.
My name is Dr. Rivka Tungarbu from Africa and Nigeria. We have been talking about platforms and ethics. We have this very unique problem in Nigeria where we have several loan platforms. You know, as a result of poverty, many people can't afford so many things. So there are these online platforms that come up with several loan offers. And some of those loans will be as little as, say, $10 or $5. And after customers get these loans, they give a specified time period that that customer must pay. And let's say 2 days after the deadline, the loan companies will publish the customer's name and say, this customer is dubious, is bad, and paint all manner of image against the customer. So to me, this is actually very unethical. I'm just wondering, what role can an economist play in research in this case? Because this is one of the challenges we are going through in Nigeria right now. Thank you.
The customers. Would you like to comment on that?
Yes, as far as I understand, as I imagine that this is a situation in which the company has too much power and can easily abuse this power in the way that it creates like the loss at the side of consumer and maybe a social loss. So I don't have a clear answer to how to deal with that. Maybe, well, in Poland we had like these companies which offered the loans, which were unfavorably, which costed more than they should, and probably this was the surplus in consumers. So the consumers became more wealthy and they less needed these companies. So it was the macroeconomic situation, but I also know that there were some regulations towards this sort of company. So maybe this regulation on the market level should help, but this is difficult to say it in a straight way.
Which is not a good situation in the end. Any other questions? Don't be shy.
Yeah. I guess there is one question, right?
No?
No.
Also, maybe I will ask the question to our guests. Like, as Yuri said, like there are two kind of culture, like the collective and individualistic culture. Sorry, societies, but it's the same. And how do you perceive Poland? Is Poland, from your point of view, more individualistic or more collective?
Well,
It's more keen.
I was walking around Katowice yesterday, and I was just writing to my friends and said that, look, I find the people in Poland a bit more reserved, and they don't tend to say hello to foreigners. So I just curious why. So maybe because you were formerly under Soviet Union bloc, and you just open up. Not recently, but in the last few years, and you are slowly getting into the collectivist culture, or into the culture where, you tend to express yourself. But at this stage, to me, I feel that you are a bit reserved, and maybe a bit want to know more about us, and at the same time, we want to know more about you. So that's how I look at it.
It's more individualistic culture, but it is the comparison with New Zealand, basically, where people are more like exchange the greetings in many situations, at least from my experience. Yes, we are doing our lesson to be more open, but I hope you feel welcome in here.
Oh yeah. I feel welcome here. Just that I observe, in New Zealand, Justina just mentioned, is that when we go to a shop, we always say hello and how are you getting on while we're waiting for the goods to be delivered to me. I'll give you another example. I was in Frankfurt Airport on Monday, and I went to a store and bought a pretzel and a sandwich and a bottle of water, and I asked the question too fast. I just said, how much is it? The guy turned around and said, I'm not a machine. I'm not a machine. Can you just wait for a while? Let me key into the machine and then give you the price. Whereas in my observation in New Zealand is that, oh yeah, fair. Just wait for a while. I'll get it in for you and tell you the price and so on. So whereas in Frankfurt it was very different. I'm not a machine. So just wait.
People, right? It's quite a busy airport, for sure. But you've many times been to Hungary also.
I've been to Hungary since 2006. I've been there 18 times, 18. Sometimes twice a year. I have a friend there who invited me there practically every year. And obviously, I just was asking someone, I don't know whether I ask you about Cinque. Cinque?
Very good.
Yeah, but to me, that was, quote and unquote, that was more like Hungarian. So I didn't know that in Poland you use the same word.
For me, it's like, it's difficult to categorize culture with one word, right? And I mean, we have that practice of saying, look, there's important cultural dimensions, right? And collectivism and individualism is one of them, right? And we're trying to find how do we fit our data into those categories, where in reality I think it's much more complicated than that. And they said sometimes collectivism and individualism can play a role, sometimes it doesn't. But there are also like a lot of other ways of trying to label a culture. So for instance, there might actually be much more differences rather than looking at cultural dimensions, but people who live in cities versus the rural areas, right? Because of the way of living. It could also be things like, political situations, right? Or political or historical situations which have nothing to do with culture. Yeah. So I think for doing cross-cultural research, and I'm not particularly expert in that area, but I think it matters to really clearly define a context where certain cultural dimensions really matters. Because most of the time, at least in my experience, it's not the kind of like, oh yeah, you know, you're from Poland, you have this kind of culture, and therefore you behave that way.
Yeah.
It's
not that simple.
yes.
You need to know a little bit more, but you called back the research. So my last question is about the future. And do you have any plans for future research? Do you think about something? What do you want to do next? What is your next step? What we can read in the future from you?
Well, I'm semi-retired, and I'm more interested in finishing off the data collection data set that I've collected from 92 countries and trying to find out that how important they are. For example, how do I put it? I read an article in the Harvard Business Review about two professors doing some research about sitting in an aeroplane. So if you are sitting in front and you want to recline your seat, how much the person at the back prepared to pay you not to recline the seat? And then the next question is how much you prepared to accept that the back person pay you before you recline. So it's about $30 over. So the back person is prepared to pay $30 over. The front person is prepared to accept $40 over, something like that. So here my question here is, if you go to two business buyer seller, for example, and the buyer say that I'm prepared to reduce my ethics or etiquettes, no, I'm prepared to accept your level and how much you're prepared to accept in my case. So the data set has been, the analysis have been done. I just haven't looked at it, so I might be able to publish that paper in Harvard Business Review, maybe. If not, then in one of those journals later on. Yeah.
Great. What about you, Yuri? It's so many papers.
Yeah, there are a lot of different topics, but one thing that I'm interested in is, just related to what we're talking about, is consumption of cultural difference.
Okay.
And that is to do with how people consume other cultures. And trying to understand, how do we process information from other cultures when we have imperfect information about it, right? Like, for example, consuming Polish culture, right? Mm-hmm. While you're being a tourist. But also looking at the moral issues associated with that, right? So how do you do it right? How do you do it ethically? Right? And whether we should be doing it. Because on the one hand, right, we've got this discourse of cultural appreciation that, it's important to consume other cultures because it's the way of us learning about other cultures, right? On the other hand, it's like when you do that, you risk to not doing it right and misrepresenting a culture. Right?
For sure. Yeah.
So I find it very interesting how people reconcile these issues.
Yeah. Thank you. And what about you, Professor?
I have a dilemma, which way to go. So I basically want to research platforms, business models, and so on, and rather stay away from consumer behavior. So at least to have specialization and to focus on it. But my dilemmas are following: whether I should try to analyze platforms in a quantitative way, whether I should analyze them with Python or some other language, programming language, or whether I should analyze it in a qualitative way, in the way that I research some specialists and get to analyze their opinions and so on. So both are good, but when we talk about sort of determinism, so not necessarily my decision, but in which way a project evolve and in which way they force me to use a method, then it would be rather the qualitative way. So basically, the project research project that I will have in the nearest future, 1 year, will be more qualitative than quantitative. I somehow regret it, but this is like the flow of research, of projects that somehow forced me to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I wish you all good luck with your new projects and new research challenges, right? Because what we need to do is still finding the new topics to explore. And as Yuri said, the knowledge, right? We need to develop the new knowledge to learn from it and to build something new. Thank you, guys. It was really nice talking to you and hosting you at University of Economics in Katowice. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for sharing with us and with our students your knowledge, your experience, the findings. And also, I strongly believe that there will be also inspiration for us as researchers to maybe to collaborate, but also to work together on the joint conferences, maybe on the joint programs. So hopefully, this is not the last time that you are here at our university, and we can see and we can exchange this knowledge quite often. Thank you very much. And I would like to give you a special certificate for the participation in this program. So Kim Pham, thank you so much. Thank you very much. Thank you. And Yuri Sel. So maybe the last pictures we can take, and yeah. Yeah, it's okay. All right, thank you very much. Thank you also to you, to the professors and students. And of course, you are very welcome tomorrow. Tomorrow we also start at 10 a.m. And tomorrow, Latin America will be on the stage. Thank you very much.